Something about Craig Wright.
That's the first thing that's said on. I just hit record, and you said something about Craig Wright.
No, we were just talking about Jesus, so it came up.
Look, we saw the numpty signal in the sky. We hear you in these troubled times, and we have decided we needed to convene and help shed light. There's so much crazy stuff. I don't even know where to start. I don't know. Roger Ver rumors, Phil Wilson making a new proof of work based on hardware system or something, consensus system, the market tanking. I'm not sure. Where do we start, guys?
My job offer at Enchain.
You got a job offer from Enchain?
Come on, man.
It was plausible. That was plausible.
I'm shocked, but I would not be surprised at all. Like, at all. Like, hey, TK, like, we don't care if we have to pay you and we don't care how much. Can we make a press release that announces you work for us? We don't care if you do anything. We want to be able to announce it.
My first speech would be the Enchain they couldn't kill.
Hey, speaking of Enchain, so here's where we can start off some interesting information. So we're working on this book, right? And I don't
want to get sued. I didn't get a job offer from Enchain. That was complete joke.
Yeah, it's got a confidentiality agreement though. So even if you did, you couldn't say. So I'm hung on this one chapter, right? It's about the actual costs of running a full node. And I'm trying to compare between BTC, BCH, and BSV. And I'm finding old information or whatever, not great quality information. So I started emailing people and posting in the forums, trying to get some better quality information. And I got some interesting data points. One, I heard back from somebody who runs a block explorer, and they said, they didn't give any specifics, but they said it cost about 100, at one point it cost about 100 times more expensive to run a BSV node. And I thought that sort of makes sense given what you have to plan for in terms of scaling. But then he said they reached out to Enchain and asked to have something changed to reduce their costs, and Enchain obliged, and it dramatically reduced their costs. And I thought, okay, that's a cool data point, that behind the scenes, you got a businessman contacting the people who were working on the protocol, and like, they didn't make any great public announcement about it, but just behind the scenes, they got something fixed that helped businesses. That was a good data point. The other interesting data point I got was I posted this in the BCH forums, and I said, I'm trying to compare 1 megabyte versus 32 megabytes. And I learned something I didn't know. So there has been multiple 32 meg blocks on BCH. But then the people pointed out, oh, actually be better to compare 22 meg blocks, because the only people that have pushed out 32 meg blocks on BCH were BSV miners.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So the people, whoever pushed out those blocks, they were using, I assume, the Bitcoin SV software that then went over to BSV. I thought that was an interesting data point.
Steve, I'm just trying to imagine, as a businessman, let's say I'm running a business that involves running a node. I'm trying to imagine, oh, you know what? We're having a hard time. This is too expensive. Why don't we just jump on the phone with Amari over at ABC and see if he can, help us out?
Impossible.
Can you imagine that phone call?
Yeah. Amari would insult him and then ask for like $50,000 for his time or something.
And then talk about why the solution is actually technically inefficient.
Yeah, right.
So
you wish Enchain would make announcements like that more and less of like,
yeah,
hey, we just got another patent that is dubiously enforceable.
Yeah.
So we saw, like, this week, Roger Ver creates an account on Twitch and Powping, and all kinds of hilarious things resulted. First, a whole bunch of BSV people being like, oh yeah, it's only a matter of time. Roger's come over to BSV. We won,
A lot of the same people who also said that Roger should never come to BSV, by the way.
I don't know. If it's
like a month ago.
I don't know if it's the same people.
Well, I think the only person I've seen who's very consistent is Satoshi. He's really on the case. He really wants to make sure that Roger doesn't come to BSV unless Roger gets on Satoshi's show and lets Satoshi explain Bitcoin to him.
So, and then there's this whole crowd of like maybe BCH people who are like, okay, I see what's happening here. This is what Roger's going to do. He's going to do this. He's going to do this. And then this is all part of a big scheme. It's all part, like, everybody loves to decide in which way Roger is bad or making a mistake or what Roger's about to do. And they always have some opinion about, like, if Roger only knew more, he would do this, or he would do I don't know. It's the funniest thing. People love to talk about this dude and his motives to a level that in all three forks of Bitcoin, that's what's unique about it. All three of them now, like there's a crowd that just spends their time ripping on Roger Ver. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I had I call it the BitPay / Roger Ver bellwether, that whenever a Bitcoin community starts shitting on either BitPay or Roger Ver, something's going awry. And I just saw, I think Vin Armani put out a thing saying he's starting to suspect that the real problem all along is Roger Ver. So the bellwether is going off again.
Yeah, can you imagine like Stephen Pear from BitPay? I mean, I've met that guy. Can you imagine like being a jerk to that guy? Like he's so nice, and like BitPay is like trying to do business. You know, that was when I was like, BTC is off the rails when they start blacklisting BitPay and all these places. You know.
Yeah.
And BCH following suit.
Well, and so is BSV, right? Then Calvin puts out makes a special press release on his media arm saying that they're like welcoming Roger to Antigua with a lawsuit to try to get him for all his nefarious activities.
Okay.
Vague criminal activities.
Okay, so let's talk about that. This is the weirdest thing. Like, I am trying to figure out in what world Craig and Calvin view this going after Roger as a winning strategy. And they keep saying, Calvin keeps saying publicly, hey, we've told Roger, we've given him a chance. If he would just stop attacking us. It's like, what is Roger doing to attack you? If like Roger's the aggressor and you're playing defense, if he would just live, like they sued him. He won the lawsuit. Now they're suing him again. What is he doing? What all this criminal activity he's doing, attacking us, what is he doing and what is the strategy? What do they think they're going to get out of this? It just seems utterly stupid. I feel like I see a guy, Roger Ver and Bitcoin.com and all the things he has, that is like this close to making BSV 10 times more relevant. And every time you might think there's a chance of that happening, these guys drive him away. And my only theory is that Calvin and Craig, they want to be the biggest voices and the most influential people in BSV. And they are threatened by someone like Roger because they're afraid he will take some of their influence. So they want to scare him away with lawsuits and keep him out of the community. That's the only thing I can come up with that makes sense.
All right, so here's a theory. I previously compared Roger Ver to Dennis Rodman, but maybe there's more explanatory power if Calvin is Dennis Rodman. Hear me out.
Okay, so I'm already tracking with you because personality-wise and just style of life, yes.
Needed to go to Vegas in the middle of the season because that's what it takes for him to be his best. He's got to be in the middle of all this drama. So Rodman was part of a championship team that had the winning formula, right? At the same time, he had these off-court vendettas and issues that were just as important to him as doing what it takes on the court to help the Bulls win the championship. And sometimes if you're part of the Bulls, that scares the hell out of you, you know? And there's always this question of, is Rodman gonna actually stay away from distractions far enough to do what he needs to do on the court? So one way in which Calvin could be Rodman is because, look, he's got the winning formula. If he makes sure that he delivers on the court, he'll actually see the team to a championship. But at the same time, he's got these other things that he does, maybe not because he thinks it's part of a winning strategy, but just because he prioritizes things that are personal for him as much as he prioritizes winning on the court. It could be that. We've talked before about there's kind of like this temperamental thing where if you say certain things to him and Craig, they're not going to appreciate that. And you can become enemies real quickly, and things could just be personal. I think between them and Roger, it's personal. I don't know what it is. I'm never going to understand it, but this is a personal beef that goes beyond Bitcoin, I believe.
That makes sense for Craig, but it doesn't seem like Calvin actually has a personal beef with Roger. It feels like he's pretending.
Here's one other potential theory. I remember when we talked to Roger on the show, when he was describing what happened in Thailand, it made me think that Craig and Calvin had a strategy to essentially get rid of as much as they could of a certain type of like libertarian idealist from BCH. And maybe that was the right call because there's quite a number of those types of people who are actually pretty toxic for the project. So maybe this is an extension of that, where he's thinking if Roger comes in too soon, he's going to bring a bunch of losers with him that have attached themselves to Roger and also at least nominally share Roger's ideology. So it would still be bad for BSV or something if he came over too soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's plausible.
It's so interesting though, because there's all this talk about the unique value proposition of BSV is that it's a lockdown protocol. Power has been removed from money. And this is the answer worried. When people are like, well, what about Craig Wright? What about Craig Wright? Power has been removed from money. But it's also like, we don't want Roger because if he comes over, he's going to ruin everything. You can't believe both of those things at the same time.
That's what's so weird. These people that are like, Roger, stay away. And like, also like, well, it doesn't matter what Craig believes personally. That doesn't affect BSV. Then why does what Roger believes personally matter? You weirdos.
I also thought it was ironic because the BSV crowd and Calvin Craig in particular single out Greg Maxwell and his divisiveness and his rhetoric. And Maxwell is like practically an evil dude. I think that's justified. But in that press release that they released, it was like Greg Maxwell wrote it. They made sure to mention that Roger was a convicted, felon selling explosives illegally online. It's like, dude, you took that out of Greg's playbook.
Well, and then the thing they linked to about Roger's supposed support of criminality was a letter on Bitcoin.com about Ross Ulbricht.
Oh,
was it? Yeah, that's it. Like that's the only. As I was looking, I was like, okay, where's this? What is Roger involved in that's so criminal, right? And I clicked, and I was like, something about let's free Ross Ulbricht, and I was like, well, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hardly being a criminal.
Any human being with a brain and a heart, or even a quarter of one, go listen to Steve Patterson's interview with Lynn Ulbricht, and then walk away, regardless of if you think Silk Road is a bad idea or if you think drugs should be illegal or any of that stuff. Walk away from that and tell me you feel really enthusiastic about Ross Ulbricht serving consecutive life sentences, you freaking morons. Like, that's just like humane and normal to be like, this is a screwed up, unjust process. Like, give me a break. It's so weird. Why though? There's got to be another reason. I mean,
well, so one reason I think it's evidence to the fact that there's another reason is that the stuff they're saying it's such obvious bullshit. I can't believe anyone buys it. Like, they don't. I know Calvin doesn't buy this crap because the stuff they're mentioning about Roger, it's like, this is all stuff you knew when you guys were buddy during the Bitcoin Cash days, and it didn't bother you at all. Like, none
and
of
it's
this
all
stuff
stuff you can say about Calvin. Like, how many times has he been sued and investigated?
He was on the FBI most wanted list for a while, and yes, he was cleared. He was cleared, and that's great, But yeah. But I just think like all this stuff they knew about Roger before. They knew about his political views. They knew about his views on Ross Ulbricht. They knew about his views on dark nets and dark web, like all that stuff. Never a problem until after they had their falling out.
But doesn't that just show that it's personal?
Yeah, personal or strategic.
Like, I think it is for Craig, but I don't get that from Kelvin. I think he's either just making an error. He thinks it's all just like fun and games, or I just want to support my guy Craig, or he has some other scheme involved that like he doesn't want all the attention and everything that Roger would both receive and bring to BSV. I don't know. There's something that just feels fishy about it.
Yeah, because Roger being on BSV would be less controversial than Craig Wright. You've attached yourself to the most controversial person in crypto history.
Well,
okay,
the idea of
let's go there for a
people,
minute.
Sorry, you can go, TK. We never let you talk enough.
Yeah, Derek, why don't you let TK talk? Jeez. TK,
He's still.
You got it, man.
We're just going to be silent until you speak.
Whenever y'all shine a spotlight and put so much pressure on me, like, it's got to be so damn good. It's got to be so good. I was going to say, maybe let's try to speculate on this for a minute. What an alternative strategy could be, assuming that it's a strategy and not just them being temperamental. Could you say there's an understanding that, look, we already got the most controversial man in crypto, and we've doubled down on him and we're sticking with him. Who's the second most controversial man in crypto? It'll be Roger Ver. Who has been attacked the most in crypto? It will be Roger. He's been kind of singled out. You know, I think he's called Bitcoin Jesus, not just because he's spread the word, but he's also taken a lot of stuff, right? So if you bring Roger on, you got the two most controversial personalities. Could it be the case that maybe Calvin is like, I need to say just enough to kind of keep him at bay for a while? See, that still doesn't make sense to me, though.
Well,
No.
Roger is controversial to some people, but he commands a lot of respect among outside of the core crazy people still. I mean,
he's only controversial to like weird insiders on Twitter. Like MSNBC thinks he's a respectable guy, or whoever, like news media people will bring him on, you know?
Yeah, and VCs will talk to him. All the major crypto companies will talk to him. You know, Craig's not having calls with Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, right? But Roger can pick up a phone and call him if he wants.
Wasn't there like a Bloomberg interview that never came out that Craig was supposed to be on? Remember that?
I don't know.
I'm sure there's a lot of content. There's the missing book that never came out.
And Craig's interviews in the last year, they're all the same now. No matter what the topic is, they're like, Craig, tell us about growing tomatoes. And he's like, we are going to put criminals behind bars. You know, like it's just the same. Okay, so and this is weird too. This is where I think this whole like law, we're going to be legally compliant thing is just so, despite my philosophical disagreements with it, it's just so strategically wrong-headed. It's so interesting that you mentioned Roger's the type of person that he could get on the phone with Brian Armstrong, right? Or the people at CoinDesk or whatever. That saying, well, we don't want Roger to join BSV, because this is another theory, because Roger openly advocates for freedom, trying to, you know, get away from government control, advocates for markets in things like marijuana, even if it's illegal, and being able to use privacy coins because he doesn't like the state. He's a voluntarist, right? And so that's dangerous. We're trying to not get BSV banned and made illegal. So that kind of guy is dangerous. He's too vocal. But at the same time, we know the way that freedom works in the real world. If you're able to get on the phone and get on a call with the CEO of Coinbase, which is probably going to be publicly traded at some point, or some of them that are public, like you are already within the mainstream. I would say Roger is less liable to be legally, like Bitcoin.com, I think is less liable to get shut down than some weird tiny BSV association that's lobbying the government of whatever is stand to have a committee meeting about giving them some honorary certificate of authenticity. Like this strategy, to me, it's you get legitimacy by being viewed as legitimate by the public at large, and then government later decides, okay, we're not going to shut you down because everyone else views you as legitimate. You don't get legitimacy by begging governments for legitimacy when the rest of the world at large sees you as illegitimate. If you're, Coinbase, that's much harder to shut down because they have big name VCs who are like household names who are connected to people in politics and whatever, than it is to shut down something, some BSV project somewhere that's begging governments for permission all the time, but nobody in the public has ever heard of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think just the risk assessment about what makes governments more likely to shut you down is completely wrong. Trying to play their game and beg them for approval, you're only ever going to continue begging and waiting on them versus just saying, let's just grow really fast and force them to adapt their laws to us. It
would be better to have a couple big companies come buy a lot of BSV than it would to come, like I was reading about, MicroStrategy. I don't know exactly what they were, they bought a bunch of Bitcoin recently, BTC. They bought a bunch of BTC to be like a reserve asset, and they're part of like some really big conglomerate. And so they bought a lot of BCC, right? And so there's MicroStrategy bought a lot. There's the Grayscale Investment Trust. There's the Winklevoss twins. There's Tim Draper, who has a lot of Bitcoin. All these guys, you don't think they're very well connected, right? If government starts dicking around with Bitcoin, they're going to pick up the phone and call somebody, and they're actually able to have a real conversation. And that's just how law works, right?
Every one of those investments, every one of those connections makes it harder to outlaw or ban or restrict Bitcoin because there's more people who are connected to more money and more power, and the political cost gets higher and higher. That is how you go. You don't go begging regulatory bodies full of poor people who are lifelong bureaucrats to approve you. You go start getting people with money and power and influence and business interests to use and invest in your thing, whether it's been regulatorily approved or not.
And by the way, this is one of the reasons that Bitcoin, BTC, you shouldn't just count it out, right? I mean, it's possible that in the future, Bitcoin does fork to larger blocks. I still don't think that a lot of the big whales have yet even realized how hurt Bitcoin has been by everything. And so when you get to a point where it really, they start to feel that this is going to hurt their investment, you better believe these guys who have hundreds of thousands of coins can put some pressure on a couple core devs. Right now, there's just no incentive to do it, I think, from their perspective. But so that's why you got to grow quickly if you're looking at BSV. Don't dick around with getting patents and begging for some committee to approve you.
Time is your enemy. So your first market, if your first market is governments, who are the slowest moving entities on earth, then you are choosing to play a losing strategy.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Derek. Blockstream and those guys raised so much money, but at some point that money is going to run out. And if they need to go back to the reservoir to try to pay themselves, we've already seen devs are quite comfortable dicking with the protocol if they get paid or the prospect of getting paid. So maybe you're right. Maybe there could be some big BTC investors who actually get their shit together. That's interesting. This topic makes me think about the whole question of whether or not trying to ward off Roger is personal, because like we also talked about it on the show before, at some point, the hope is that the business interests override the personal stuff. That at some point you need to scale and have enough people using it where not everybody who is using the same money likes each other, or maybe they really don't like each other. I just feel like this is such a big ball drop. Not in a weird way. That's kind of a weird sentence, but it's a dropping of the ball to have somebody like a Roger who is coming with a lot of connections and skill and business behind him. Even there's almost a sense in which the fact that he is at odds with Craig and Calvin, maybe personally, makes it that much more of an opportunity to show, wow, look how big we are,
Huge.
Yeah, it'd be a great way to prove that you're actually confident that the protocol is locked down. I mean, in that argument too, I don't even buy that well, just because Roger has already said one of the things he likes about BSV is the focus on having a stable protocol. I don't think if he were coming to BSV, he would be like, oh, we got to add this, and this to the protocol, right? Roger's not a protocol dev. Roger is building products and services on top of Bitcoin. He doesn't actually want constant splits because they screw his business up. And he has felt the pain over the last 2 splits deeply. He doesn't want any more of that crap.
I saw Roger post somewhere when someone was like trying to talk him into BSV or something on Reddit or something. Yeah, but here, look at the BSV open license. Open is just a euphemism. This is not an open license. I haven't dug a ton into this, and I've heard a lot of different things back and forth about it, but what do you guys know about the licensing on BSV? I've asked a few entrepreneurs who are building on BSV, and I've kind of basically gotten, yeah, that's a risk that I take into account, that since nChain basically owns all this licensing stuff, they could potentially sue me or tell me how I can use things. But my strategy is the protocol is good and stable, build on it and get big enough to where it would hurt them more to sue me than to not. And so I'm playing that game. But like, what is the deal with the BSV license? Like, if you're looking at that and saying, does nChain really control everything that happens on this chain? They say anyone who builds on BSV can do anything for free, but it's not like an MIT open license. What exactly does that mean? Like, is that a big problem for building on BSV?
Well, as Satoshi once said, I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't possibly tell you, which is odd because, for a variety of reasons. Anyway.
I haven't yet completed my mail order master's in law. I'll tell you when I do.
But I think that I've looked at it. I mean, it's definitely not a traditional open source license. It's not. So there's that. But there's also, I'm not convinced that it's deeply enforceable. Anyway, like you can slap a license onto an existing piece of technology, and again, the Bitcoin technology was released open source a long time ago. So you can slap a license onto some stuff and then say it's yours. It doesn't mean that's true and that it's enforceable. So My own thought about pretty much everything with the legal stuff is that it's actually not enforceable. It's just all bluster, just like the libel lawsuit against Roger. I mean, Roger's going to have his legal fees paid again if it has to go through there's no way that's going to be constituted as libel. So I think it's the same thing with this license.
That might be true, but you still run the risk of being Craig and Calvin's guinea pigs to figure out which one of their patents are enforceable.
Yeah, no one wants to be sued because it's a huge waste of your time.
Exactly.
Even if you win. I mean, it's just drama is the enemy of progress. So,
right.
Yeah, I agree.
A wise man once said that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's you. I think I came up with it and you were high.
Hey, maybe what we're watching is a form of government white knighting. Maybe BSV is white knighting. So I'm still not sold on the idea that there's an actual belief that being nice to government is the way to advance BSV. I'm not even sold that there is an actual belief that that's a good strategy. What it has always seemed to me, what's always seemed to be the case is that there is an adoption of legally compliant rhetoric in an effort to distance BSV or disassociate BSV from an anarchist, anti-state narrative that they are afraid of, because they believe that that's eventually going to get squashed. All of these different exchanges like Binance, all of these different altcoins, that's eventually going to get squashed. Now, you can disagree with those propositions, but I'm just trying to offer a coherent explanation for the thought process here. If you believe that there's a whole bunch of illegal activity going on in crypto, you believe that stuff is hot on government radar, we still don't know half the answers about what Craig's level of involvement is with law enforcement in terms of helping capture criminals, although there definitely seems to be some evidence that he has kind of been involved in that kind of work. So we don't know what they know in terms of the amount of heat in the background on some of that activity is. And so it may be less the case that BSV is saying, hey, as long as we get government to like us, we're going to be able to succeed. No, because you still got to build. And they still probably know that, which is why Calvin's investing in a lot of stuff, even if he's not making smart investment decisions or whatever. There's still an effort to build, but separately from that, there's this effort to protect the narrative from being associated with anarchy. That would explain why Roger Ver could be considered a threat. Because if he comes over, all the examples of success that you guys offer offer that he could bring would come along with this need to accept a bunch of enemies that they see as doing illegal work. I think that's a possible narrative there.
Okay, I'm running with it, and we're going to tie it into COVID. All right. This might not be separate from the Australian government. So as of like the past couple of days, it's become clear to me that Aussies are crazy, and they are very willing to tolerate abuses of power from their government, like eagerly willing to submit to whatever's in their ridiculous constitution over there. And like the reason I say that is there's a couple of videos that have been going around of cops like busting down people's doors or arresting them in their pajamas because they posted links on Facebook to like shut down protests, which is crazy because in the place that they're trying to protest the shutdowns, you're mandated that you stay in your house 23 hours a day. You can see the sunshine for like an hour and you can't leave in a 5-mile radius. Like it's absolutely crazy lockdown there. But it makes me think, okay, so what if Craig is a crazy Aussie? There's two theories here. One is he personally is a crazy Aussie and like has absorbed the bootlicking philosophy that seems to be popular over there in Australia. Theory two, which Julia brought up this morning when we were talking about this, she said, well, maybe he's just scared of the crazy Aussie government. Like perhaps it's the case that, like what you were saying, TK, you got to make sure you are capturing the compliant passive rhetoric. Otherwise you get this maniacal government coming at you. Maybe that's what's going on.
And so that's the white knight analogy, right? Because the white knight isn't really a good guy. The white knight uses his ability to explicitly point out what the bad guy does as a way to disassociate himself from that. And you think, oh, no, you're a good guy. Your Trojan horse theory that you brought up a long time ago is not off the table for me.
I mean, here's what's weird about all that though. Like, oh no, if we get Roger over here and all this anarchist rhetoric or whatever, you know, it's gonna be a threat. Has BCH been shut down or faced any of that? Has BTC, which has at least as much anti-government, burn the Fed, you know, whatever rhetoric, they don't face it. I would say I have a greater confidence that BTC and even BCH are going to survive legal challenges than BSV. BSV seems way less stable to me because God knows what they're up to. Like in terms of in the eyes of government, I almost feel like getting more attention from government by trying to talk to them is a greater risk to you than just moving ahead. And then you get to plead ignorance. Oh, sorry, we didn't know, when they come and tell you something's illegal. Well, what do we need to do? Versus going to them first, initiating it. Like, that seems way riskier. And I just don't see, if Roger was constantly setting up, you know, businesses on BCH that were getting SWAT teams shutting them down, and he was some controversial, if he was like John McAfee or something, okay, I could see being like, we don't want him because he's going to bring law enforcement sniffing around. He's not, though. He's a pretty mainstream dude. Philosophically, he's a voluntarist and he likes this stuff, but like, he's running a large legitimate business and he hasn't had any of that kind of stuff.
He specifically says all of his stuff is compliant. Like, they go out of their way to be compliant in the jurisdictions that they're in.
Here's a positive sign though. So Roger sets up his little Twitch account, right, in Powping. As much as there's all these people, mostly Craig and Calvin, and then a handful of weird, you know, cultists. Go, we don't want you, Roger. I think an overwhelming silent majority, so to speak, of BSV people are like, love it. We're all about it. In fact, Roger's the one that inspired me to get into big block Bitcoin in the first place. Come on over. The dude racked up like, you know, like 20, 30 bucks just from joining Twitch without ever tweeting it, without ever posting a single Twitch, from people just following him. And, you know, that's a positive sign to me that like people using BSV are a lot smarter than the people talking about BSV.
Well, it might be a low bar, but
yeah. And here we are talking about BSV. That's why we're numpties. We're not smart. We're just a bunch of numpties.
Well, I'll tell you one thing with this whole law strategy. There is definitely a lot of pressure now mounted upon whatever, the CNC team to actually deliver in the courtroom. Because something that I think we all agree on here when it comes to law is that it's very naive to place blind faith in government and its ability to interpret the law to your advantage. There's so many different ways to arbitrarily interpret the law that even when it is on your side, you can go into a court case and get screwed. Even if the evidence is on your side, courtrooms are not some sort of guarantee that the truth is going to win. We have seen this in our lifetime played out over and over again. Sometimes guilty people go free. Sometimes innocent people get charged with crimes that they're later vindicated for because of corruption. Corruption happens, you know, and you can't talk about crime without talking about the crime that happens everywhere. You can't treat crime as if it's this, you know, thing that exists outside of government, and government is this pure group of angels that devote themselves to stopping crime. And so we know that, we believe that. I think there's some reason to think that behind the scenes, there's an already existing relationship to government agencies that explains this confidence. But if there isn't, there's a tremendous amount of pressure to deliver now. I think there was a point where a lot of people would have said, doesn't really matter what happens in the McCormack case, doesn't really matter what happens with this or that lawsuit. But the more you boast law as being the way, and the law keeps saying, I don't want you, the worse it makes you look. I don't think BSV can just keep on enduring that indefinitely. Either the law rhetoric has to subside, or you've got to deliver some legal victories. But you can't keep bragging about how the government's your girl and your girl keep cheating on you in front of your face.
So speaking of court cases, I think, Derek, you just sent it right before we got on. Now the Wright v. Kleiman It's postponed till January of 2021. I've been telling you guys for over a year, this thing is never going to end. There will never be resolution. And especially given our video with Dave from Unbounded, kind of breaking down in detail all the implications and what's going on with this trust. From what he was saying, it sounds like it is possible that they have the ability now, this trust, to move these Satoshi coins, but they don't want to until the court first says, yes, Craig is Satoshi and he owes this money, and then he'll move the coins after that, because if they move them now, there'll be all kinds of horrible blah, 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 blah. They're waiting for that. So, but I don't know, like, it said it had to be decided, if I remember correctly in that trust document, by the end of 2020. But if the court won't make a decision until 2021, what does that mean? And is that possibly a play by the Kleiman people? Maybe they watched our video and they were like, oh God, he's got to move him. He's got to move him by the end of 2020. Quick, let's delay the court case into 2021 so he can't move him. Like, what is going on? I mean, what is happening here? I don't know. It's never going to end. I mean, do you feel like there's some other better reason that we should be continuing to pay attention to this court case? It seems at this point like never ending.
None of the other court cases have panned out. I mean, his case against Hodlnaut, whatever, that BTC guy, he had to Craig was ordered, I think, to pay him $60,000 or 60,000 euros in legal fees. And from what I read last, Hodlnaut has not been paid yet, and it's been many months. And then he was ordered to pay Roger like 150,000 pounds. And I think Roger did get paid for that. I mean, all the court cases that are hyped up as like these landmark things, they all keep turning into, I mean, just money losses for Calvin and Craig. So is there a reason to believe that this is a unique case compared to the other ones? I don't know.
Well, like, I think it seems to lend more credence to me to the idea that, and I know they didn't supposedly choose this court case, but for some reason, all of these court cases, all of this bluster, it's all a big smokescreen and delay tactic. They want to do something behind the scenes, and they want to keep everybody's attention focused on something else while they're doing that something behind the scenes. But like, what could that be that would justify the amount of expense that they're reputationally and money-wise putting forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they have Satoshi's hard drives, whoever Satoshi is, and are simply trying to brute force it. I mean, that would take a long time and would be very expensive, but it could pay off.
Why would you need to have a bunch of court cases? Like, you could just couldn't you just do that in the background without creating the media hype?
Well, maybe it's something like they feel that in order to sell these coins, they have to pretend that Craig is Satoshi, because otherwise it'll look like they're stolen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And they want a court order they want a court to say, oh, it's his, right? And therefore, because whoever moves Satoshi's coins from BCH, BTC, or from BSV, it's going to create a huge news thing right away. Everyone's going to be jumping all over it. It could potentially crash the market temporarily. And so there's going to be a lot of interest in it. And if you have a court that said, these are your coins first, it's maybe a better thing than, hey, where did you get these coins? We don't believe you're Satoshi. How did you guys steal these with some kind of clever mining tactic or something like that?
Yeah.
According to Phil, you remember, because I want to talk about Phil again and bring it back to what he's working on currently. And I feel like he just doesn't get enough consideration in these conversations because his stuff is so interesting to me. But didn't he say that, like, yeah, the Tulip Trust is real. Yeah, those coins are in there. They are owned by both Craig and Dave, but Craig's trying to get them to claim that they're all owned by him. Isn't that his take? And does he claim that some of that Tulip Trust also belongs to him, or no?
So it's a bit more complicated than that. He says he has no idea whether or not the coins exist, but he has some recollection of, I think it was Dave, telling him they were setting up, or maybe Craig, I don't remember, telling him they were setting up the trust, and a third was going to go to him. But he wasn't in the position of saying, these definitely exist. I've seen them. I know who has the keys or whatever. It's just like, I remember this happening, and I was supposed to get a third of them. So that's the other, potential explanation for Phil, among many explanations, is that maybe maybe he thinks there's a percentage chance that Craig actually does have 1 million coins and simply wants to be able to sue him when the time is right or something to try to milk him. Who knows?
The thing I love about Phil is the question, like, why would he make up this story? Like that is one of the more perplexing things, because I don't see any, maybe just engaging in fantasy and getting to talk to Steve Patterson for 8 hours or whatever.
Well, he hasn't milked it for all he could.
Right.
I
don't see any, like, it just reminds me of the scene in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where, you know, Lucy goes into the wardrobe and then she comes back and she tells all the kids that this is what she experienced, and none of them believe her. And they go to this professor and they're like, what? She's just telling this lie. She just keeps persisting. She's crying. She feels bad because they won't believe her. And he's like, does she usually lie? Well, no. Is she benefiting from this in some way? Like, is there something that, and they're like, no, she's suffering horribly. And he's like, well, the easiest explanation is that she's telling the truth, right? I think, like, why would Phil make up this story that fits these gaps so perfectly, but is also so uncredible with his claims of amnesia?
Well, he published it on just like an obscure website and never tried to promote it. It didn't get like any attention when it was first kind of shared. Yeah. It's really odd, you know.
He's the opposite of Craig Wright too, because he's got these, you know, he goes into amazing detail fantasizing what it would have been like to make a conceptual breakthrough about Bitcoin. But then when I was talking to him about, like, what were you doing before? What were you doing afterwards? He was like, oh, I was working in graphic design, making he literally said making Winamp skins. Do you guys remember Winamp? Like the little Windows music player?
Yeah.
He said he was working on the skin. Like when you double click, it comes up. And then afterwards, I was like, what were you working on? He's like, well, I was, you know, looking at maybe making a scooter business.
Yeah, so people gave him a hard time about the Winamp thing, but Finn's really actually technically competent, right? I mean, he's actually,
seems to be.
He seems to be very technically competent.
And his background is in really low-level language programming, like assembly language. He was apparently, I can't confirm whether this is true, but the claim is that he wrote DirectX in assembly language, which is like would be an absurd thing to do. And I think the claim is like he just wanted to do it because he said he could. So if that's true, yeah, he's definitely technically competent.
So that brings me to what he's working on now. I saw a tweet. And, you know, it's funny because Phil, like, for a while, it looked like he was kind of doing some stuff in BCH, and then he kind of disappeared again. And he has, like, no followers on Twitter or Reddit. His stuff always gets no interaction. But it's, like, really interesting stuff, regardless of if you believe his story. If he's a liar, he's still a very interesting guy, right? Like, but for some reason, he's, like, this big blind spot. But maybe he's solving once and for all big block Bitcoin's problems, whether it's BCH's horrible taxing takeover rent-seeking scheme or BSV's licensing and ownership by InChain. He's trying to do what now, Steve? Like tie?
So this is a really interesting idea. So he's trying to make the Bitcoin consensus part of the hardware for mining. So that way, in order to change the protocol, you would actually have to or you have to change the chip manufacturing specifications, adding some little thing on a mining chip or part of the ASIC that is necessary in order for miners to put blocks out on the chain.
So it's not as simple as like a GitHub commit then.
Right, exactly. It's like it'd be a much larger. Yeah, it's a hardware change.
It'd be much more harder cost and difficult.
And you'd have to convince many more parties deeper in the sort of structure of production to, like, make alterations to very fundamental long-term things.
Well, so there's a few interesting ideas here. Well, there's several. So one is, I'm not sure if he is just pursuing this because he's curious. I get that impression that he's just wondering maybe you could do this. And so, like, he's put videos out there. He's got his little circuit board he's working on. He's like connecting to the code, talking about the actual, you know, programming that he's doing. You can see
he's mining the silica.
Yeah, right. Like he's doing a level of just, he's demonstrating some level of technical competence where if I saw one video from Craig doing anything comparable, I would be like, oh, okay, Craig has at least some kind of programming skills. But Phil's just putting it out there. And, you know, the YouTube videos get 8 views, that type of thing.
There's one video of Craig, there's one video of Craig from from like, I mean, a long time ago. It was like 10 years ago, maybe, or something like that, or maybe more. And he's with he's with someone. I don't know who he is. He's in this.
Is it Jim Morrison? Is that the one where he's with Jim Morrison?
Oh God. Did he say he kissed Jim Morrison or something like that? No, there's this video where Craig has a glove on that he has supposedly designed. And he's got this glove that allows him to do, what is it, NFT payments? It's a payment. NFC payments with this glove. And so he's like walking around this like Walmart or something like that. And he goes up to like the McDonald's at the Walmart and like raises his hand and like pays with it like magically with this glove that he supposedly built himself, right? I don't know. That's the closest I've seen.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Can you imagine the Peter McCormack case when it comes down to it? They pull out the glove in the courtroom and they have Craig try on the glove,
and it fits. Yeah, or does it fit?
Does it actually fit?
Yeah.
TK, that would be like the moment where all of your dreams and interests just intersect in a beautiful explosion.
Yeah, but even that, like, I haven't seen that video, but that's not. I want to see actual programming. I'm not a programmer. I just want to see some bit of actual programming code from Craig. But anyway, so this idea. So that's one thing that's interesting. I'm not even sure if this would be something for Bitcoin. Craig, I've also talked to Phil, and he said he's thinking about making his own new coin according to his vision, which is like he wants it to be planetary currency. He wants there to be like a global
Phil's vision.
Yeah, exactly. Phil's vision, which is like a global taxation system with tessellated triangles that represent your taxation districts and stuff. So that could also be like from the beginning. He's thinking the miners who are going to use this will be from the beginning using this particular hardware chip that makes the protocol set in stone. But it was also, there's two more things I want to say on that. One, it is very consistent with the way I'm thinking of Phil Wilson as so far the best contender for the person making the conceptual technical breakthrough. It's very consistent with the way I'm thinking of Phil to do something like this, where he is thinking big picture systems and he's thinking, okay, I wonder if there's a way to actually do something that people say can't be done, because if you could, you'd actually get some cool benefits of it. So the way we were all conceiving, the way I was conceiving of it, you can't lock the protocol in stone because of all the social factors, and you can't prevent miners from running one version or another. And he's in thinking, well, okay, maybe we could just greatly increase the costs such that it gets locked down more by having this hardware chip that you put on your ASIC computer. I'm thinking, that's really interesting. I don't know if it'll check out. I don't know if it'll work. I don't think he knows if it'll check out or work. But that he's exploring that makes me think that is what somebody who would be a Satoshi type person would do.
I wonder if anyone else has ever talked about that before, because Phil seems to have just odd ways of coming through interesting breakthroughs that once you hear them, it's like, oh, that's an interesting and almost obvious route to take. Almost, it sounds really, but then you never think of it.
Right. And with that kind of systemic thinking, he's also doing technical shit. He's like tinkering. He's literally tinkering in his garage and putting videos up on YouTube documenting his progress. And to me, I think, okay, that's a good sign. The last thing I thought that was interesting about this, though, is I wonder, it made me really think, is that protocol too set in stone? Like maybe actually you don't want the protocol to be that sensitive, because what if there is some problem with the code? Yeah, we've had maybe 10 years to say it checks out, but if something comes along and actually breaks, or when you have that lockdown protocol, it might be a problem. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a great thought to to balance we've seen all the problems of protocol that's up for grabs based on Reddit likes. And so, yeah, lockdown protocol sounds great. And we've talked many times about how it's not really locked down, but that may not be a bug. That may be a feature. Like, let's say you have, something like you're describing, and then some new technology comes out on the market that could greatly benefit from using, Bitcoin, except it doesn't work right with some little inconsequential piece of the protocol that would need to be changed, but that change is going to be monumental in cost. And so now they're going to go create a separate coin or whatever. Like, that is a really interesting, that's a good point to bring up, Steve. The flexibility being a benefit.
Yeah, and it's interesting too from a theorizing perspective, because it's something that seemed obvious that you really would want to lock it down in stone. But then when you take it seriously, maybe you could have the technology to lock it into the hardware. It suddenly there's a whole new thought process that materializes, going, well, maybe that's actually not a good idea. I'm not sure. Maybe that's too far.
Phil is such a interesting character, regardless of whatever involvement he had. Like two things that stood out to me, but way back when I introduced him to you, Steve,
right.
because I just messaged the guy. I was like, your story is so weird and interesting. Like, why doesn't anybody talk about it? Anyway, one thing that struck me right away was he's very confusing communicator verbally.
Yeah.
He's actually a very good written communicator.
Yeah.
Very clear. Some might even say Satoshi clear. And then he's just so out there. Like, he starts going on about these geodesic spheres with the triangles. And then he's like, and see, that's what Bitcoin is. Don't you see it? Bitcoin is made up of triangles. See how they connect the point of the triangle? And you're like, what? And then he gets done talking and you're like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But I could see how a really crazy thinker would think of that. And then, that's how they see this thing that they made. But it seems very unlikely that someone who was not a part of making Bitcoin would look at Bitcoin and then say, oh, it's like a bunch of triangles in a geodesic sphere, right? Like, there's just so many things that I'm like,
yeah.
Regardless of his role, this guy thinks differently in a way that is both weird, sometimes annoying, but like interesting and refreshing.
And the concepts check out, though. Like, he's got this analogy of a strip of triangles in computer graphics to how the blockchain functions and how he wanted it to function. And it worked. Like, if you just listen and think through the ideas, it works. The way he's describing it actually conceptually checks out. And I remember talking to somebody from BCH about this, and he was saying, Steve, you can make up a story like that after the fact and say you see it from your own angle and pretend like that's, that you were the person that made the breakthrough. And I was like, no, actually, that's incredibly difficult to do. I encourage anybody, try to take your knowledge in your domain and tell a conceptually coherent story about the creation of a technology from your perspective and see if it works. It's possible. It's entirily possible,
that's
but it's not an easy thing to do.
We should create a contest, and we should fund it the same way that BCH is trying to be funded, with a donation campaign. And we should say, that was supposed to be a joke. Nobody laughed. We should say,
it's just sad. It's no longer a joke. It's sad.
We should say, okay, come up with a story in which you are Satoshi Nakamoto and come do an 8-hour interview with Steve and fill in all the gaps, answer all of his questions. And at the end of it, whoever is the most convincingly consistent and plausible candidate for Satoshi will win the prize that we have put together. That would be incredibly entertaining, and it would be incredibly difficult. Very few people could do anything remotely like decently believable,
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, because if you read Phil's story, although I don't know of anyone really in BSV who accepts it, he actually validates Craig's claim to be Satoshi, at least in a different way. So what do you guys think? What do you think Craig thinks of Phil's story?
Craig said it was fraudulent, right? Craig said that Phil was an employee that stole stuff from him.
Yeah, and he was going to release the information about Phil being a fraud,
but he never
years ago
did. Yeah. So to me that's interesting, because Craig has actually acknowledged having had some relationship with Phil, right? So it's now no longer on the table as an option that, I guess it could be if they're like collaborating or something like that, or both of them are lying, but it seems unlikely that it's an option on the table that Phil just made it all up, and that Craig was not involved with Phil at all. They have no connection. It seems like they have some kind of connection.
It's also possible.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, it's also possible that Craig doesn't actually know who Phil is. So I've talked to Phil about this a little bit, that in his story, Phil was extremely careful about his operational security to the point where it's plausible that other people involved didn't know who he was and ever. So it might be like Phil has reached out to Craig and tried to, is maybe it's theater or not. He said he's tried to share information with Craig that only Phil would have to try to say, hey, look, it's actually me all along. And Craig has not, says that he doesn't believe him or he's not acknowledging him. There's another possibility that literally Craig doesn't know or is in some kind of has made some previous commitment to Phil that he's never going to say if he knows. Because if you remember one of the early documents in the legal document, it says, as part of the Tulip Trust, I think, we agree to never disclose the identity of this particular key. Well, what if it's the case that that key is Phil? Nobody talks about that section of the Tulip Trust. And Craig literally can't say anything for some undisclosed reason.
Well, and it's
Well, it
possible.
could be like a legal thing. He could lose access to the coins.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
let's say that Phil's story is true. Let's entertain that. The way that he framed it, he was like you said, totally secretive, OPSEC, whatever. He's working with these other people, but they don't know his real identity, don't know who he is. And then he says at some point, he freaks out, gets super paranoid, says, I'm wiping my hard drive, I'm wiping everything, I'm leaving the project, never contact me again, don't ever try to leak my identity, blah, blah, blah. He's gone, he disappears. That's all Craig knows. Years later, some guy says, hey, I'm that one guy you were working with, I'm Phil. And Craig's like, I don't believe you. I think Phil died or went crazy. Or maybe you are, but I don't know if I can trust you. Maybe someone got to you and compromised you because the you back then that I agreed with, I promised I would never disclose this. So Craig may not know. He may suspect he is. He may think he's totally not. But it may actually be that Phil was that guy and Craig either doesn't know, doesn't believe it, or does know but won't admit it because he has legal obligations.
There's another interesting option here I hadn't thought about before, but just trying to split the middle. Maybe it's the case that Phil was working for Craig in the early days. Phil says he has a background doing hacking stuff, although he says Bitcoin was his first black project. And maybe it's the case that Phil stole information of correspondence between Craig and the real Satoshi or the guy who did the conceptual breakthrough. So Phil now has information that Satoshi would have had and can play himself as the third person in the Satoshi team, but Craig maybe knows that he's actually faking that role and he only has all that information because he stole hard drives. That's another
Which is kind of what Craig claims.
Yeah.
Right?
Craig has basically claimed as much. Though I feel like
Except
that would
Craig
be
doesn't-
hard because even so
Craig doesn't claim that there was another third party, though. He just claims that Phil hacked his hard drive and is trying to be him.
Right.
He doesn't claim that there was some other person that Craig was, working with.
Well, Craig has said various times there were 3 people, and he seems to have changed his story a little bit, but he suggested before that David Reese was like the third person.
I think he's just
involved.
looking for someone who's dead that people would believe.
Well, someone to fill in a third role. It seems like he's changed it a couple times.
To fill in.
We solved it.
Well, so what I was going to say, though, is I find it implausible. I mean, I guess it's possible, but implausible that Phil could simply get some emails and that would be enough for him to explain things in the way that he did.
I agree.
Because I've read Phil's story, but I still couldn't now come back and explain things to you like that.
I've talked to some people who've met with Phil. I hope to meet him at some point. I've talked with some people who've met him, and they say it seems that Phil believes Phil. And that's an interesting way of looking at it. Where he might actually be crazy, like maybe his mind was melted for some reason, some connected to the state. Who knows? But it does definitely seem like Phil believes Phil's story and is consistent about his own story, at least.
Well, another element in this too is just how easy it is for 2 people to disagree about how important their level of involvement was to a given project. If Steve, you and I got together to create something and you did all the programming and I came up with like the vision, it would be very easy for me to look at the vision as the indispensable component. Very easy for you to look at the execution as the indispensable component.
Yeah, I built Crash. Don't tell our engineer that who wrote all the code. But,
To be frank, TK, I think you and I would both need to hire a programmer at this point. We are more on the vision end, I believe.
Well, Craig has also said some things that seem to imply that when this is all over, he's going to have to sacrifice his reputation for Bitcoin to win. And I don't just mean in the way that he already has.
I am Cassandra, right? Isn't that what he said?
Well, it seems like he's indicated that at a certain point he hid from his past or from the full truth about his life, and he had to reconcile himself to the fact that he's just going to have to own it all, own the ugly parts and the beautiful parts to his story. But the one thing that he can control is the timing of the disclosure. And so it makes you wonder what that disclosure looks like. To what degree is he keeping things? Is he keeping himself from admitting things or saying things because he knows that even though it would substantiate a lot of his claims, it's also going to put him out there in some ways that are going to be tough for him. And some aspect of him buying time is just making sure that he deals with the consequences of his life in his own timing. He does seem to imply it.
I think he's also dug himself a bit of a hole here because I think he's overstated his role. Even if he had a role, I think it's greatly overstated. And it's very clear that he wants to be perceived like Vin Armani, that is to say, an omni genius who has the ability.
I think Vin Armani wants to be perceived as Craig Wright. He has a major Craig Wright jealousy because Craig has a cult following that's loyally devoted.
Yeah, and so I actually am really starting to like this theory of Craig as the pinnacle academic, like the guy who literally went out and thought he was going to learn about the world by getting a degree in 15 different domains. Like in my like rather radical perspective on academia, if I were to create a character who has 15 different degrees in 15 different areas, I would create something like a Craig Wright, like somebody who really thinks he is knowledgeable because he's read a bunch of books, but actually never works to take his superficial knowledge and make it a reality. So if it's very important,
somehow the dude is balling. Somehow he's got money, or at least the ability to signal that he has money.
100%.
And somehow he manages to get people who are very intelligent to worship him, basically.
Well, so it is with academics as well.
Affirm him as intelligent.
But so it is with academics. Academics. Greg Maxwell's the premier example here. He can talk circles around people who don't know enough. He can make, in my opinion, the most important person in BTC is Greg Maxwell.
But a Maxwell or your academic type, like I'm with you in a way, but they don't do two things. One, they don't go around flashing stuff that makes it look like they have a ton of money or they do have a ton of money. Like they either have to have it or have access to it. And two, they don't go around burning bridges like it doesn't matter at all to them that the whole world hates them. Like that's Daniel.
But they also don't get 15 degrees.
This dude is costly signaling like a mofo.
Well, but they also don't go out and get 15 or 20 or 1,000, whatever the degree count is at this point. So you got to couple the crazy academic with this insane desire for some type of status, which is also why I think he's kind of dug himself a pit here. Because what if the story is that Craig was part of the team that made this world-changing invention, and he wanted to be the conceptual thinker, the guy who put all the concepts together, who did the programming, he made the big breakthrough, he wrote about it, wow, it's great. What if it's the case that actually he couldn't do that? He knew it could be done, but he had enough entrepreneur in him to associate with the people who actually made the breakthrough. In that circumstance, though he's part of the Satoshi team, which is an admirable, impressive thing, he couldn't make he couldn't do the intellectual heavy lifting.
He'll have like a bit of
exactly. I think that theory explains Craig pretty well.
But something that seems to conflict with, and I think I got this idea from you, is when you look at the white paper, as much as people say, it's different from Craig's writing style, those footnotes totally make you think of Craig, right? He is the guy that would create trouble for himself in the future by basically turning Adam back into a major celebrity by footnoting him when he really didn't need to. That's such an academic Craig type move.
I feel like Phil has the perfect explanation for that. In his story, he says that they needed to get credibility from the tiny group of humans who are interested in cryptography and maybe cypherpunkism or whatever. In that tiny little world, he was going to try to build out a network. He had to have some type of prestige. And so the person, like Craig could not have written the content of the right paper. He could have come up with the footnotes. Like, I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, doesn't Phil say that he like gives this draft to Craig and he wasn't even ready to publish it. It was still in draft form. Craig takes the draft plus some text from some emails from Phil, puts it in there, goes and finds like 10 footnotes, throws them in, and then publishes it. And Phil's like, what the hell? It wasn't done yet.
Yeah. And he says even some of the footnotes aren't directly relevant. Like they look sort of like Craig's most recent blog post, which is to say
it's like more footnotes than text.
Exactly. I'm sure they connect at some abstract level, but not in a direct way.
The footnote thing from Phil's story was one of the things that really made me take him seriously, because it just there was information that I thought it was unlikely Phil would have because it's relatively obscure that seemed to suggest that he was telling the truth, because like the footnote thing is not one that's talked about a lot, where there's one email from Wei Dai who's basically says, or one comment in like an obscure blog from Wei Dai where he says that I don't think that Satoshi had read my papers before coming up with the basic conceptual breakthrough for Bitcoin. And he says that, he says, my understanding is that all the citations were added later. And that's like never discussed, because when I even go look at the core narrative is very much that Adam Back, Wei Dai, these early cypherpunks were instrumental in laying the foundations for Bitcoin. And that's why Satoshi cited them in the white paper. You go to the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, they host all those documents because they claim that Satoshi was inspired by these projects. Well, Wei Dai said in literally just an obscure comment, the opposite. And then you have Phil Wilson saying this and also giving a perfect character explanation for Craig. I would just find it unlikely that Phil came to that conclusion on his own,
Yeah, and it's such a dicey position to take, right? People have at least in part due to Hollywood, people have no idea how thinking works, how conceptual breakthroughs or technical breakthroughs work, how group projects work. So their idea is like, in order to create Bitcoin, one would have to read academic literature for 25 years and then make the correct citations, and then that would lead you to the breakthrough. That's not how the world works, in my opinion. And the world works in the way that the story Phil tells is he's sort of independently working on a lot of this stuff. He's finding some half-relevant links that Craig is sending him, but they don't work out. He knows they don't work out, so he just breaks them apart and does his own thing. And then after the fact says, okay, now I need to give this the veneer of credibility for the rest of the world. And so I'm going to make fake academic connections that aren't actually there. And it's also funny too, because in Phil's story,
that's how all of us wrote our undergraduate papers that required citations. Not a single one of us read the citations and then wrote the paper. We wrote the freaking paper and then backfilled.
Yes. And it's also interesting because Phil writes this story from the perspective of somebody whose breakthrough technology is still not understood correctly. So like he makes these points that one would make if you were trying to say, actually, my invention is my invention and not an academic invention. He says, it's not a time stamping server. It's actually a chronos stamping server. And what he means is the important conceptual piece of the puzzle is chronological ordering and not the actual time, because if it were the actual time, you can game that, you can set your internal clocks differently, but the chronological ordering matters. His story is filled with little things like that, where it's like people actually miss this important concept and miss that important concept, which is what I would predict from somebody who is trying to explain their technology to the world.
Now Craig does that kind of thing quite a bit as well, and he's been right about it a handful of times as well. But it has like a slightly different flavor to me. I know we've talked about this before, where like it almost feels like he's sharing these insights about what Bitcoin really is that nobody else seems to see, but he doesn't seem to understand them on like an intuitive, like it seems like he got the insight from somewhere and had access to information no one else had, but he can't explain it in a way that makes you feel like he really knows it inside and out. And maybe that's just, he's not a good teacher, but that's always so weird to me. Like, how can he combine both insights that no one has, Bitcoin's Turing complete when nobody else says it, and a complete inability to explain that like someone who really knows that. You know what I'm saying?
But I think that's how he sounds, even with the stuff that he seems to understand, right?
And
Like,
it could be.
even when he talks about simple stuff, like he seemed like he understands the story of the Good Samaritan, and when he told it, it was just,
Yeah.
it wasn't the best retelling, right?
I don't think he's a very good communicator. Like I way back, like not back in the 90s, but back in the 2017, I made a comparison with brothers Karamazov and Satoshi, and he later wrote an article. I'm pretty sure he stole my analogy, but he later wrote an article, and I remember being really excited. I was like, "Oh man, this is great!" Like, and I went and read it, and it was like horse shit. Like, it was just terrible because like he totally blundered the point. I mean, I know I got the idea that he understood the point, but he did not communicate it, and it was like at all. It was so bad to communicate. I was like, dude, like I wrote this way better than you. It was so easy to communicate, and you just flubbered it over and over. You know,
it's almost like at what point? Because TK, I know you'll do this with me a lot. I'll be like, okay, this thing that Craig wrote or said, this is just so. You'll be like, all right, hold on. If you read it the most charitably you possibly can, you can actually see that he's saying something interesting, and you'll shepherd me through, and I'll be like, yeah, okay. But then I'm like, but at this point, you've read it so charitably, I'm no longer reading his words. I'm literally listening to you say something totally different than what you're just assuming his intention and then telling me what you believe he intended to say. And that takes like so much faith.
Well, there's definitely been times though I've read stuff where I'm like, oh, this is actually really intelligent. He just wasn't communicating it well. And I misinterpreted what he said. Like that's happened, especially one of his article on like digital gold. Like it actually made a lot more sense when I read it a couple of times. I was like, oh, here's what he's actually saying. And I don't think I was being overly charitable. But here's the thing: when Satoshi was writing, you never really have to do that. Like that's not a thing that you often really have to do when you're reading his stuff. It's like he's very, very clear and precise. Like it's so.
Derek, I feel like what the breakthrough was for me that actually made me respect and gain from a lot of things Craig says way more, because Craig is just a very bad salesman for his own ideas, was when you started to dig up all these Mike Hearn emails and old Mike Hearn posts and things. And it's like, if you hear Craig say something that sounds weird, and then you go dig up and let's see if we can find Mike Hearn talking about this. Mike Hearn makes the point that in the end, you're like, oh, wow, that's a really good point. Like traceability or whatever.
Yeah.
He says it in a way that convinces you. And you're like, oh, okay, Craig is actually right about this, but somehow he found a way to make it really repellent, you know?
Yeah. Like Hal Finney's old quote on traceability is way more marketable.
But that was healthy. Yeah.
Well, there's they both said things on traceability, right? But like Hal Finney's one on traceability in particular is so much better than anything Craig has written or said on it by far. It's not even comparable, right? Well, of course, people give all the credit to Craig, even though Hal said this back in the 90s. Way better.
I'm gonna pop out for 1 second and be right back, but I'm gonna drop a question, then I'll come back and it will be a riotous debate, I'm sure. Are we now, because the market is in a very downward trend, are we in the middle? Is this the tip of the rolling iceberg that we are experiencing? Discuss.
I think
I'll be back in
Elon Moist said that, right? He's like, he said that on Twitter. He said, what a rolling iceberg order feels like, which is great. I've been threatening rolling icebergs if for Bitcoin Cash if Amaury does too much with it. But
I wanted to make one more point. I feel like this bizarre combination of deep insight with complete communicative incompetence is very unique, and it's very coherent with how Phil describes Craig, and it's also sort of predictable. Like, if somebody, so the general academic mind learns something, they go to school, they read some books, they think themselves knowledgeable, even though they have essentially no understanding even about the basics of their own subject matter. To Craig's credit, he has read lots of books from multiple fields, which even if it's superficial, I think that's an improvement over superficial knowledge in one field.
Yeah.
So if he does have, and if he has enough sense to surround himself with people that are great thinkers or developers or workers or something, you would literally expect that this is the guy that is going to be picking up a whole bunch of relevant bits that aren't synthesized well and he can't communicate well, But if you are as charitable as TK is, or some other people who listen to Craig and are like, okay, let's try to make sense of it, you would predict that you're actually going to find some deep insights, sort of taking the little snippets and running with them and developing some important knowledge from it.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to be like super charitable to come away with this. So like, if you start with the premise that, or just with the observation that he has shared some deep insight that a lot of people miss, however terribly he communicates them, then there are really only two possible explanations for that. One is he has legit insight and successfully surrounded himself with better writers and communicators than him, or he lacks legit insight and successfully retrieved it from the people that generated it. Those are really the only two possibilities. And while you can make cases for both of them, I don't think it's super far-fetched to imagine a guy that's sufficiently obsessed, sufficiently driven, who can surround himself with the talent that will execute his vision. We actually see evidence of Craig being that way right now. It's almost inexplicable how Craig is able to surround himself with intelligent people, wealthy people, influential people who all say, this dude is smart. This dude is smart, and I'm going to act on his vision, and I'm going to finance his vision, which is something that you just don't see academics pulling off. So there is some evidence that he's just like this super obsessive, driven, tunnel vision dude who is able to communicate at least well enough to build super teams around himself who will compensate for his difficulty with telling a story in the best way.
By the way, his communication is not consistent either. So that's another problem with.
That's a good point.
Like he at CoinGeek in London, George Gilder asked him a question. Well, George Gilder said, "Oh, I think Bitcoin's perfect. I only wish that you had made the money supply, you had fixed the price of Bitcoin and made the money supply expandable." Which is kind of crazy, right? I think it's a crazy idea, right? But George Gilder's idea was that you can't have a deflationary currency because you're just not going to be able to just be flexible enough to meet supply needs, right? So you should fix the price, peg the price to like a dollar or something like that, and then be able to actually expand the supply. So I thought that was like a really good opportunity for Craig to answer something like that. And he's given good explanations on the economics of Bitcoin before, and he just blundered it again. It was just such a bad answer, to the point where like people, like it was a non-answer effectively. And I had to go onto Reddit and start explaining to people like why Gilder was wrong, because a lot of SV people were like, hey, maybe Gilder was right. That made a lot of sense. And I was like, no, that's like asinine. But Craig just could not answer it on stage. It was such a bad answer. And yet I know he knows.
But you've heard him answer it before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, so I've seen that again and again. Was like, why didn't you like, and that was actually several times during like QAs I've watched with Craig, or even interviews. I'm like, why do you say that? Like, that's just stupid. And
well, I mean, you can almost watch the evolution if you just go watch some of the video clips and stuff. Especially pre being outed as Satoshi, he's got a whole different ability to communicate and stay calm. And then even when you watch him talk to a more friendly person, now these days, even then, he just ends up going off about throwing everyone in prison at some point. But he's just got a whole different tone. But you notice like the longer things progressed and the more, and this is logical, right? The more he gets outed, public life, God knows what kind of threats or doxing, and then you got legal ramifications, and you got your reputation is getting slammed. You got whatever Core is trying to do to you, like all that stuff, and just feeling that frustration. Like you can see he gets more and less patient and more comfortable, just kind of just letting himself go stream of consciousness, doesn't sort of come in with a prepared, here's what I'm going to present on. And I'm just a guy, you have no reason to listen to me. It's like, no, I'm the guy that you're all slandering, but I'm Satoshi, you fools. And let me tell you why you're all wrong. Like you can see that's evolved over time. So if you work backwards, is it possible that once upon a time, Craig was capable of writing something like the white paper? Now, you can read his blog posts that he also wrote at the same time that the white paper was written. And those are very, very different as well. But, I'm
not convinced he was ever a good written communicator, or especially a good written communicator. I mean, even if you go back to like comments he was making in like 2011, he was talking about Bitcoin. which is interesting because it shows that he knows about Bitcoin really early on. But his emails were a little bit, there's still kind of quite a few typos, it seems, and just kind of odd ways of communicating. But I think as a verbal communicator, he has times where he's very inconsistent as a verbal communicator, and even as a written one. But
yeah,
Hey,
I feel
ahead.
like he's consistent, but he's consistently bad. The inconsistency is,
yeah.
but this is really
Yeah,
interesting.
okay, yeah.
I'm watching these theory of Bitcoin interviews, and 90% of the time, I would say, not high quality communication from Craig. But I have noticed on a few occasions, it's like when he calms down, sometimes he says things that are very good, very reasonable. It's almost like there's he gets in some mode, which is, I am Satoshi, teacher of all knowledge. And then what comes out of his mouth is like absolute garbage. But when he falls asleep for a second, is just having a conversation about ideas, it suddenly becomes very reasonable.
That is such a good take. When he is trying to be Satoshi, when he's acting like Satoshi, it's very difficult to follow him or even to listen to him, right? Like his articles as Satoshi are not very good. A lot of his stuff when he wasn't Satoshi and he wasn't trying to be anybody, he was just sharing ideas, were actually much better.
Yeah.
But you read even for example, his stuff in the Slack group, the MetaNet Slack group, which is just such a clown show. His stuff in there is like you said, I am Satoshi, teacher of all knowledge. I am your God. I know everything. Here I am, and it's like, it's just terrible.
TK, why?
Well, first I want to say it maps over pretty well to what communication is like when we're maybe arguing or we're trying to sell an idea in what we perceive to be a hostile environment. So like, imagine you're giving a sales pitch and the person's friendly and they're interested in the product. You're just calm, you're relaxed, and you're conversational and you sound smart, charismatic. But then when the person's like, well, what about this? What about that? I don't know about that. They're objecting and they got you going off pace. You're starting to feel insecure. You want to sound smart. It's just like you develop a stuttering problem and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think at least half the time when he's talking, he's still responding to core people. He's still responding to like these defensive narratives that makes him sound like that. And I agree with that observation. Regarding your question, Isaac, why? So I'm gonna make a very cult sounding statement.
No, TK?
For the first time.
I'll wiggle myself out of it.
We got balls dropping, weird wiggling, all kinds of stuff in this episode.
I don't think Craig Wright has ever presented himself to the public as he truly is. I believe there's more to Craig than what he's shown. And I believe this is probably the most obvious statement we can make about him. Whether you believe he's honest or dishonest, clearly he obfuscates, right? Clearly he conceals. Clearly he implies things, but then backs off it, says one thing, tends to change it. Sometimes
like the time he posted a stock photo of a yacht, and he's like, "This is my life. This is proof of work." And
with the Shutterstock watermark on it.
That was later. Greg Maxwell hacked into his system and added that Shutterstock later.
But clearly, whatever his goal is, it is not to tell the world the story of who he is in the simplest, most transparent, straightforward way that everybody keeps telling him they would love to hear. He's not doing it in that way. And I think something that gets pushed in the background of the discussion on Bitcoin, we often think of Bitcoin in terms of, if people just understood this, we could achieve adoption. If Craig just, stopped being so ambiguous and mystical, we could achieve adoption. If BSV just stopped talking about law, we could achieve adoption. If we just got somebody like Roger, if just this, if just that. And I think all of this assumes that the world wants Bitcoin. And I have a much more pessimistic view of the world's take on Bitcoin. I believe the world needs Bitcoin. I believe the world can be sold on Bitcoin. I believe the success of Bitcoin is possible, but I don't think the world wants Bitcoin. And something that everybody kind of possessed as a shared understanding in the early days of Bitcoin is that the powers that be would not want a thing like this to exist. This is so revolutionary that it's not just potentially profitable and exciting for the individuals that are early adopters, but this will overthrow power structures that have no interest whatsoever in giving up that power. And I think that's still true. And no amount of talk about law and compliance is going to convince me otherwise. No amount of talk about how crypto is getting mainstream and institutional money is coming in is going to convince me otherwise. I still see Bitcoin through the metaphor of war. This is a war. And in a war, there is nobody that talks straight. In a war, there is nobody that communicates in plain language. Everybody is communicating through code, through indirect speech, through threats, through innuendo, everybody. There is nobody that I've heard in crypto that makes me think, yeah, that guy is telling me everything that's going on. And that doesn't mean it's because people are trying to be dishonest. It's just that people have business that they can't tell. And in a war, that's exactly how it is. There are certain truths or facts. If you just tell it to people, please let me know. You can put their lives at stake. You can put other people's lives at stake. You can put yourself in legal risk in various ways. I mean, we had Roger on the show and, we were asking him certain questions and, what did he say at one point? Like, look, I can't even talk about it, guys. I'm in the middle of a court case. I'd love to go into it, but I can't talk about it. How many people are in that kind of situation where they love to just be like, look, it's real simple, ABC, 1, 2, 3, but they can't. And I think Craig has that going on in spades. And I think that accounts for a lot more confusion in a lot more rivalries, a lot more conflicts than we'll ever know. Sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the BCH BSV drama would be much easier to resolve if both parties would feel like they could air what actually happened, their version of the stories, what actually happened publicly. Like I was telling people at CoinGate, they're like, why won't Roger just come over to BSV? And I was like, there's a lot more to the story of what happened. According to Roger, he's just not going to talk about publicly because he can't, right? He can't, and that's totally understandable. And I'm sure maybe CoinGeek has some of their side too. I mean, I don't know, but it's useful to keep that in mind.
TK, you and I know on a small scale how you can have things that appear very simple to the outside world involving your business or people you're working with. And people are like, what in the world? What happened here? Oh, I can't believe that. And you just have to say, oh, whatever. And you can't tell them. And even your reputation suffers sometimes and they think you're an idiot who made a horrible decision or you're a jerk or whatever. And you just have to let that slide because you can't go publicly airing out laundry of things that people will never know happen behind the scenes. And like, there's a way in which being prominent or successful in any arena, there is always a level to which the general public has no idea how much you suffer, how much you have had to put up with, and how much shit behind the scenes. You can never tell them. They don't know the stuff that you've had. Like, and I know just from the small amounts in my life, the times when I've leveled up little by little, I know how, wow, that just increases. And I can't imagine being at a level of scrutiny or wealth or influence like a Roger, like a Craig. Man, I know there's just so much that, rightly or wrongly, whether they're good or bad people, whether their strategies are right or wrong, they suffer a lot more than I think people realize. And they have a lot of reasons that they may never be able to share about some of the stuff that might seem crazy to us that they do.
Well, and even if there's not a deep, like specific legal reason or privacy reason, there's like, it's an unfortunate fact. Like if being in the position they are in, being the person to go air drama or air your response or share like private emails can only like, it often makes them look worse, even if they're right. It's like, you may want to be the one to go share that because the person is lying about you, but it could make you look a lot worse if you're out there being like responding to them, which is what they were talking. Just watching Vin Armani respond to every troll. He's like, Dr. Bolsheviks called me a witch doctor today, and he's going to post about it. I'm like, dude, do you not realize how cringy it is that you're responding to like the most random asinine Reddit person? You're like publicly responding. No, I'm really smart. I did this first. Look, I did this. Like, it looks terrible. Just let it go.
It never changes anybody either.
What's that, TK?
it never changes anybody, right? Like the people that already agree with him take his side, and the
Yeah, of
people
course.
who made him get defensive, they never go, oh, now that you explain that to me that way, I'm totally sorry, dude.
Well,
It
and
doesn't
like, who
work.
writes the tell-all book? It's like the janitor that got fired from the Wall Street company. It's not like the board member writes a tell-all about his fellow board members, you know, like they're it's just.
Yeah.
All right. I got a question for you guys. I have not followed a lot of this, but every 6 months to 12 months, I think maybe I need to pop back in and see what else is happening in the world of crypto outside of BSV. So I look at CoinDance and I'm like, what the hell? There's like 10 coins now that are bigger market cap than BSV. We got Polkadot, we got Chainlink. I know, Steve, you have been kind of following Grin / Mimblewimble a little bit, but is there anything else happening? Every time I think, okay, everybody's talking about DeFi and freaking Uniswap and sushi and yam farming, and this stuff just seems crazy to me. And I go and I do a little digging. It's like, nope, Ethereum still can't scale at all. And all this stuff's built on Ethereum. So is there anything else? Why are there all these other projects? I'm just curious, your thoughts, market as a whole. Any of you done any curiosity poking, digging into anything outside of Bitcoin?
I made some money off Chainlink. I mean, I don't know anything about it. I mean, I saw on I logged into Coinbase one day. I don't really go on Coinbase much. And I logged in and I was like, what's this? It's like pennies, you know. I don't know exactly what the price. It was very low. It was very, very low. So I was like, I think I put like $50 in. I got a lot. I mean, for the $50 for the return. And then it shot up to like $20. I was like, okay. So I sold it all the other day at around $19, $20 or so. And now it's down to like 10 or something like that. So it was a great trade. Now I looked into Chainlink a little bit. It was really weird. And Steve, I don't know if you know, well, I don't want to mention, I'll have to go. TK and Isaac and I have had a cult experience once, let's say.
You all did psychedelics together or something?
I was far removed from this.
Yeah, but you were to blame for getting us in that. You were to blame for getting us into that situation where TK and I were like being groomed for a cult. And it was all Isaac's fault.
We didn't actually join the cult, but we were in a context where some strange get out type things were happening, and we had to get that out.
And it's gotten much creepier since then. Right?
Derek sniffed it out and fled immediately. TK kept trying to find a way that he could still get value from these teachings, despite how weird and cultish it was. He gave them a long rope before he decided it was too much. The
reason I'm bringing that all up is because I was recently doing some investigations into this whole thing, because there was just some other weird stuff that's happened. Really, really freaky, weird stuff. So anyway, I was doing some investigations, and I ended up following onto this page about Pythagorean cults and sort of like the belief in like Saturn as like the original sun and all this stuff. Well, as I was reading the article, this guy brought up Chainlink, and I was like, what the hell? So I went and looked, and one of the founders of Chainlink is apparently wrote like a sort of like a Dan Brown novel on Pythagorean satanic cult. And he apparently allegedly believes all that stuff and is like deep into this cult stuff. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories about Chainlink. That's all I wanted to say. It was a roundabout way of saying there's conspiracy theories about Chainlink. I don't know anything about it.
So the Saturnine cults, they use the cube imagery.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, according to Phil Wilson, is the triangle. We're going to have the triangle versus the square in an epic showdown of biblical, spiritual proportions.
Well, we know there won't be any circles involved.
Bitcoin is light.
That was so funny at CoinGeek London. It was like the opening video. It was like, Bitcoin is light, and it was this huge explosion of light and truth. It is truth. A universal record for all human history.
Steve, did I just catch you saying, well, we know there won't be any circles?
That was a really good one.
I'm glad that didn't go unheard.
No, I got it. So I haven't followed much else. I see some people talking about the sushi one. I haven't
followed. I mean, I occasionally browse through, and it looks like some of these are built on Ethereum. And we just saw recently Ethereum fees shot up to insane amounts, $10, $20, $30. Interacting, I heard somebody say on social media that for interacting with some particular spot contract, it was for $70.
And I have yet to hear anyone in Ethereum, similar to how Core was, say, hey, yeah, of course, this is untenable. Here's the big plan to get fees down to 100th of a cent.
Well, the plan is Ethereum 2.0, right? I mean, that's the plan. I mean, that's
Yeah,
part of the
but
plan. There's sharding and other stuff. So sharding is what it's like having like a bunch of mini blockchains that are all connected or something like that, as I understand it. And
yeah. Yeah, and Vitalik came out probably maybe a month ago or so and said he admittedly like, yeah, this is actually a lot harder problem than I was expecting it to be.
yeah, Ethereum 2.0 keeps getting delayed, right? I think
Well, and
the
I think
actual
there's they were planning on changing to proof of stake as well, right?
That's the Ethereum 2.0. Yeah, it's like a move over to proof of stake. Like I was telling you guys this about on Vox. I was like, this just sounds terrible. Like if you're thinking about it as money, because like you've got to actually you have to go on a website like and make sure you lock up your coins to make sure that you actually get access to them on the new chain. When they launch the proof of stake chain. So, for like a passive holder who's like just like I'm holding this as my cash balance. Like, imagine having to like coordinate that. That's a nightmare. Like there's gonna be people who are gonna lose a lot of money.
Did you guys read Jackson Lasky's article on why cash-based system like Bitcoin is necessary versus an account-based system like
I didn't. It looked interesting.
It's short. It's really good. It's really worth reading. Like I actually had not. I guess I had thought about adjacent ideas, but I had not thought of it in that. It's a very clear like, hey, this is why it doesn't work and it can't work to scale in the way that you want it to scale. It's a great article. I call it Scream. Scalable cash rules everything around me, like the Wu-Tang song Cream. Cash rules everything around me. But I posted that joke on Powping and like nobody knew what I was talking about or thought it was funny.
No, nobody understands Wu-Tang Financial yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I always like when you make like a reference that's like is super funny, and then like no one really gets it, or maybe like one or two people get it. Like I thought I was being super clever the other day when I compared Vin Armani to Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter. I just thought it was like perfect when he was like because he told me he's like if you want to know my thoughts on this, you're going to have to read my book. And I was like, okay,
Wait, is that actually a quote? I can't tell who that a quote is from.
Yeah,
is that from Gilderoy or from?
Well, Gilderoy is very similar because Harry Potter walks in and he grabs him. That
literally sounds like a Lockhart quote.
Yeah, because he's like, Harry didn't know that he would be leaving with an entire collection of my books. And he's like, I didn't want your books.
Do you know what they're like? I'm too old for Harry Potter. Do you know what they're talking about?
I mean, I'm too old for it, but yeah, I've watched all of them.
I mean, I've seen the movies with my kids, but I didn't read it as a kid, so I don't remember who all the characters are.
That is hysterical, Derek. I was racking my brain. I was like, okay, that is definitely a Gilderoy Lockhart quote. Like verbatim, that sounds like you took it out of Harry Potter.
Yeah. No, Gilderoy is like this, just like, kind of like fraud, but he's always just talking about himself, all his accomplishments and all the things he's done. And he's making sure everybody making sure everyone wants to read his books and stuff. And
get his autograph. Yeah.
Get his autograph.
What do you guys think? Like all these people, like, again, it almost feels similar to the ICO, not quite to that craziness, but when that ICO thing, like every rando person on the internet was talking. This is what I feel like with this like DeFi and swaps and all this stuff. Like there's like this whole subculture of people and the levels of complexity to this. You see some of these tweets where people are like, swap from USDC to YAM to some Uniswap to sushi to whatever back to this. And then made that, and like, I'm like, there's no there that I can see. Like, what? Either I'm just too much of a numpty to understand the value of all this stuff, or this is just a wild, John. What's that guy's name? John Law, the big Mississippi company scandal where he was selling the. You guys know what I'm talking about? The dude that went to France, the Scottish guy that went to France and then was selling shares in the Mississippi company in this big giant Ponzi scheme. Go look him up. John Law.
I remember his name from history class, but
this stuff is wild, man.
Yeah, well, I don't. Sorry, TK, we never let you talk enough.
TK, anything you want, buddy.
I can't accept that.
Yay, TK just wants a hand up, not a handout. Okay.
I just want a hand up, not a hand out. I'm gonna go after you, Derek. After you, my brother.
Okay. I struggle to get interested in all this stuff. I mean, whenever I see it, I tend to wait. Like on some of this stuff, I'm not a super early adopter because most of it just seems like hype. And DeFi to me still seems like a way of trying to do finance without any actual personal responsibility. And that seems a little bit dangerous. Like where do you go once the whole thing collapses, right? Like there's no one to actually fulfill that debt at the end of the day necessarily. And so, it doesn't excite me much. I know there's one DeFi project on Bitcoin Cash, right? I think AnyHedge is positioning themselves like a DeFi product or something.
I know they
like
were
that.
talking about it for a long time. I don't know if that ever came to fruition. There was discussion about changing the protocol actually in some particular way to allow for easier DeFi stuff. I don't know if we'll see that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just more excited about cash. Like I just want cash, right? I mean, that's the innovation. I mean,
and scalability.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Ethereum has run into these, I actually don't know how this works, but if the Ethereum blockchain has $10 fees, does that mean every single token on Ethereum has these extremely high fees? They're not totally separate
well,
networks,
you have to use gas to send Ethereum, to send tokens. So
and then you got to get, so if you don't have a reservoir of gas, you have to at least somehow access it at some point by interacting with the underlying Ethereum blockchain, right?
Yeah, you always, whenever you send a token, you have to have gas. You can't send it without sending Ethereum.
That just seems like a catastrophic problem for a base layer that doesn't scale.
Doesn't it? It's like in all the like Silicon Valley tech excited nerds think, oh, Ethereum, Bitcoin's old stuff, and all the money gold people think Bitcoin. And like both of these BTC, they just seem so obviously broken. It's just, I know this is just a dead horse, but it just continues to flummox me.
Well, there's just a lot of money. I mean, people are with money are just willing to throw it around when you're hearing a term like this. It sounds great. It's like, oh, DeFi, decentralized finance, no one can stop it, blah 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 blah. Like, it sounds nice. I get excited. Then I look at it, I'm like,
Sushi coin, sign me up.
Derek, be careful. You can't talk about people with money I don't want you to start sounding like the ABC people who are like, oh yeah, Roger Ver like accidentally stumbled into this URL bitcoin.com and then became a bajillion.
Oh God, there are these two absolute idiots. I won't name them because, well, yeah, I'm not going to name them, but there's two absolute idiots who are deep in with ABC saying the other day on Reddit, like, Roger, you think you are better than me because you are a millionaire. That doesn't make you smarter than me. It's like, dude, you sound like such cringe. You sound terrible. And then the other,
I saw one that was literally like, oh, Roger just has this asset. He just happens to have bitcoin.com. And gets to try to milk it. And I'm like, if I remember, you guys might Google this, is an undisclosed amount, but it is rumored that the purchase of bitcoin.com was one of the most expensive URL purchases in history. Like, the dude made a ton of money in business, was very, very prescient in Bitcoin, expended a lot of resources to not just buy it. How many URLs just sit there and print you money, but to turn it into a legitimate massive business with 11, like whatever you want to say about Roger, just this idea like, oh yeah, well, he's just lucky because he just happened to have, he's just domain squatting on bitcoin.com.
Well, and it wasn't just bitcoin.com too. He also had, I think it was blockchain.info or blockchain.com. I think the same thing now, but he got a lot of domains and it was a lot of work. He actually had to track it down. I think somewhere he mentioned it was a lot of work to track down either blockchain.com or blockchain.info. Like, took a long time for him to do it. And so it wasn't like this luck thing where he just like logged into Namecheap one day and was like, oh wow, look, bitcoin.com is $8. Okay. Like bitcoin.com was already owned. And by the way, a lot of people don't know this. Bitcoin.com was registered a year before Bitcoin itself was released, supposedly related to a different project. I don't know. I've always had some conspiracies about that, but someone else owned it for a while before Roger ever had it. It passed through several hands. It wasn't like
URLs don't just print you money. You got to do something with them.
He was trying to get bitcorn.com, but he misspelled it and then figured out after the fact he accidentally bought bitcoin.com.
TK, you said you would go after Derek, and then all three of us talked for like 20 minutes.
Well, it's funny, just speaking of Roger, whatever happened to the attitude of someone who sees another person that's balling in a way they're not and saying, I wonder what I can learn from this cat. We're a generation that is so quick to take pride in how much smarter we feel, because it is an emotion, how much smarter we feel than someone else, that we render ourselves incapable of actually learning from them. It's like, this dude has accomplished things that many people in this space have never touched. Many people in this space have never even had a real job, let alone run a business. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, it's like there is so much more to know about life and success than being able to talk a bunch of intimidating sounding technical talk. Like, yeah, you may know how to code, but have you actually achieved anything? Have you actually built anything? You haven't made any real money. Like, here's a guy that's done
the money thing's the key. It's like, oh, I've made something. It's like, but you haven't managed to make any money off of it.
Would you say that, TK, that one ought to adopt the mindset of a numpty, perhaps?
No, I'm gonna write a Zen book called Numpty's Mind.
Yeah,
it'll
Zen
be
mind,
like,
beginner's mind.
Yeah,
Numpty mind.
The Numpty mindset.
So I think a significant percentage of the recent hatred that Roger's now getting from BCH actually comes, well, so speaking of not naming names, I think this is actually what's going on. There's two people
it's like Voldemort. There's my Harry Potter reference. He who shall not be named.
Yeah, well, so there's two people that come to mind. One is somebody very connected with ABC who I talked with. Well, it's not gonna. People will know who this is, but who cares? I just won't use his name. Left ABC because he did not like Omri. He couldn't handle working together. Thought Omri was a good developer, but had personality conflicts. We had a long conversation where he essentially said his bags were still very, very heavy because he got excited and bought near the top of the BCH boom. And he was going to have to find another job, move to a different city because he was in financial difficulty. This particular individual is now one of the loudmouth, aggressive ABC proponents, in my opinion, simply trying to get part of the IFP money by kissing Omri's ass now, even though he doesn't like him. I think it's 100% the dude is putting on a front because he thinks if he is loyal to Omri, he's going to get paid because he bought when the price is high. That's one of the, there was another individual, I forget who I was going to say, but same exact story where, I was going to, individuals, let's say, who have staked the livelihood of their families and their children on the appreciation of BCH, who have so much skin in the game, they are hanging nay on a cross. Their skin is so welded to the plight of BCH. I imagine those people are also in the position that, hey, look, if there's going to be an IFP and you got 8% moneymaker going to this individual, you kiss that dude's butt and then you get paid. Honestly,
well,
I think
they took VC money and 2 years ago and haven't made any money on their business, and things are starting to look a little bit dire.
I think it's just honestly that straightforward.
Steve,
in a lot of cases.
I like that guy that you're talking about. You guys are mean to him.
I did. I mean, I thought he had some good things to say a few years ago, and I think he just went off the rails. He's not an honest person. I'd say that confidently.
I keep seeing, I keep seeing these ridiculous attacks, not just on Roger now too. It's like they were talking about Jonathan Tooman the other day. They're like, you bought a $3 million house. You don't need money anymore, or something like that. It was something so
there was
asinine.
one that was like, hey, this guy Mark DeMeasel or whatever, because he donates like $1,000 to people's read.cash articles or whatever, throws them. Hey, this guy's throwing money around. What kind of person throws money around? You got to ask yourself that. They're usually connected to pedophiles. It was like, what? Like, what?
Yeah, Omri called Mark a pedophile because he gave money to people.
Maybe Omri and these BSV people that, think that if you wear a BCH t-shirt that you're like supporting, maybe they are a match made in heaven. I don't know. Can accusing everybody of these horrible crimes for no reason. Yeah,
I mean, it certainly seems like the pot calling the kettle black now. ABC, I like we said one of these episodes, if Craig and Calvin tried to pull the IFP on BSV, BCH people would have cried bloody murder and said, look, you bunch of stupid people, you were deluded. This is how they're going to try to milk the protocol for money. And yet that's exactly what they've done.
So prediction time for BCH. Now it looks like it is, ABC is saying 100% they are going to hard fork November 15th and create the IFP. Roger has said he will absolutely not support that. So it looks like 2 coins, fight for the ticker symbol. Same thing we've been through before. What is going to happen?
I think there's going to be 2 coins regardless. I don't know how it's going to happen. I know there's something about BCHN needs to get 10 blocks in a row in order for there to be a split. Otherwise ABC is going to start reorg them if they are not able to get 10 blocks. That's what everyone keeps saying. And like no new nodes, they're saying. I don't know why, but they're saying no new nodes for BCHN will be able to sync under the current framework if they don't get 10 blocks in a row. So it will automatically make no new nodes being able to sync, and it'll be really difficult for them to actually be able to stay alive.
I wonder why that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into the technical stuff enough, but I keep seeing various people on both sides say something like that. And so the argument some people have said is like, we just need to go ahead and basically plan for a split. But I think BCHN's position is like, well, ABC is actually the one forking, right? They're the ones who are doing this. We're just trying to stick with the current plan. ABC is hard forking to a new thing. ABC's position is, no, you guys are forking, and we're going to put you in a position where you have to actively say you support a split. Because once you do that, we can tell the miners that you guys are the ones who are dicking around with this. I think that's like Omri's strategy, the entire strategy has been to put BCH into the position of looking to the market like they are the minority fork or they are the opposition. Well, and the way they do that is by getting them to admit that they have to go ahead and add replay protection and plan for a split.
Well, it's a weird, you now realize this 6-month forking thing, how sort of maybe clever by some perspectives it is, how maybe insidious, but you would normally say Omri wants to introduce a completely different rule set that creates this miner tax. That is clearly and obviously a deviation from the status quo.
Exactly.
Right? But when the status quo is changed, when the status quo is every 6 months we hard fork, this month's hard fork includes this. And if you don't do this, you are deviating because the status quo has hard forks baked in. Now, you've basically done this Orwellian doublethink thing. Status quo means stays the same. Change means changes. But when the status quo is change, then any change I want and you don't like that change, you are now the one who is deviating from me.
You're the opposition. Yeah, no, it's kind of genius. You almost got to think it's intentional. I think even if it wasn't intentional in the beginning, I think they've realized this, and that's what they're playing. They're playing like you have to be the one to say you're forking. Otherwise, it's crazy to me, right? Because all BCHN was supposed to be was we're just continuing with exactly what it was without the IFP. Like we're just the status quo right now, and that's it. But they've designed it in such a way that they're hoping that's their hope. Now we got to see what's going to actually happen. Is are Rogers connections, for example, going to be enough to convince exchanges? I mean, the thing is that I don't think exchanges give a shit, right? I don't think miners.
I was going to say, like, BSV people are gloating about this. I don't think this is necessarily good for BSV. I could see a scenario where BCH splits into 2 coins, both of which have a higher market cap than BSV, and BSV becomes even less relevant because it's now the 4th version of Bitcoin in people's mind. Like,
it's possible. I don't think that'll happen, though. I think it'll be lower value. I think in the end, it's possible, though. Yeah. I mean, what I think is going to happen, though, is that like what I think we need to consider when we're thinking about what's going to happen is exchanges don't care. Miners don't really care that deeply either, I think. And so the incentive for them to go through the process of switching to BCHN is fairly low, I think. Like you've got to have a lot of activism on the part of the BCHNers to go out and actually get them to go through the process of like, here's what's happening. You've got to switch over here. ABC's forking off.
BCHNers sounds like a bad word.
Yeah. So ABC has over the last 2 years entrenched themselves as like the establishment Bitcoin Cash node implementation. And when people don't care, they don't want to have to go through the process of switching, right? So it's possible that the ABC just kind of wins by default.
Yeah, I think the personal connections at the exchanges is probably going to go farther than anything technical. So I think if Roger if Roger has the patience and the endurance to pull a bunch of strings and contact people and tell them the circumstance, I feel like they'll probably end up with getting the BCH ticker symbol. And I'm thinking too, if without Bitcoin.com and Roger, let's say they're on the BCHN chain, what is the infrastructure for the ABC? Like what's going on specific to ABC that it looks like an industry or a unique coin or something? Because in my mind, what BCH is in its entirety is in a large part the network of Roger Ver and Bitcoin.com and what they're doing.
Yeah, well, no one seems to be wanting to go with ABC. So what ABC has basically said is, well, we're just going to go over here and we're going to have a bunch of money and we're going to hire all this amazing talent and rebuild everything. I'm like, that's like asinine to think that that's what you're going to do. You know, you're going to just get this big pot of money and then you're going to have a global council where you all vote on the things that need to get funded. And then you're just going to hire top tier talent. And
is that a real term, the Global Council? I saw
the Global Network Council. That's what they called it. I'm dead serious. That's
a great idea.
Yeah, people were comparing it to Palpatine when it's like, the attack on my life has left me scarred, and now I'm, doing all this.
What's funny too is I wouldn't be surprised if this happens if there is a short-term honeymoon phase. Yay, we got our IFP. Now we got all these funds. Everything's great. Now look, we're hiring people. Everybody agrees. We're all together. We're doing stuff. Maybe even that first hard fork comes 6 months later and everybody's happy and they're getting their tax. Then another one, 6 months, there's a little bit of conflict. By 18 months, it's going to be a rent-seeking disaster of political infighting.
Oh, I think sooner than that. And that sounds like the ultimate developer boondoggle, the ultimate developer. Like BTC was a project where they raised money to pay developers from VC. This, you don't even have to have the connection to VC. This is just straight up, you get to skim.
It's an ICO. It's turning BCH into a developer ICO.
Well, and the miners
you're skimming off.
Pay. Yeah, the miners aren't paying. That's a big thing too. Is you're skimming off a block reward, but you're paying for it with a difficulty adjustment, difficulty reduction. So the profitability of the miners is going to stay the same. So the miners, they're basically just going to kick some miners off the network, and the miners who are doing this, like they're not going to lose money really. So the opportunity cost for them is just a security reduction. But they don't give a shit anyway because apparently no one ever attacks these chains no matter what the hash rate is. So for them, there is no opportunity cost. And so there's no, like, ABC can just get whatever they want, and the miners don't actually care. They're acting like the miners are going to hold them accountable. That's not what's going to happen.
Right.
That's not what's going to happen.
And the value of the chain is going to have been built based on the network effects of a different chain.
Yeah.
And some of these other coins like Bitcoin Gold or other garbage projects, they still hold value. They're still traded. So if you could weasel your way into an 8% of the block reward for Bitcoin Gold, man, you just hit the gold mine. You just get all the expert developers, all your buddies, and just party.
It doesn't matter,
Every time I want to laugh, I just remember that Litecoin still exists and has a price.
Well, so one thing that is funny, they with this new Global Network Council, it's actually a later development in their original governance plan. They had an original governance plan, and people are like, they're acting like, oh, this time this is the one that's going to work, right? Well, what happened with the previous one? The reason they scrapped the previous one is because they nominated John Fuchball, Chris Ellithorpe, and Josh Ellithorpe and Chris Passia to be the guys who were going to sound the alarm if anything fishy was happening, right, with the IFP. So that's stupid enough, right? Because these guys are all friends. It just sounds right. But it's funny because those guys sounded the alarm. They said, this is fishy. We don't support it. This is bad. And so ABC just said, okay, well, we're going to switch the governance model to something new. And so like what's going on is the same thing. The network council is going to be whatever ABC decides is the network council in the moment, and whatever gives them the bet. It's like court packing, it's like textbook, like FDR court packing.
TK, I know you almost fell asleep when we talked about BCH. As a full-blown BSV believer, we got to come up with, like, they used to call Justin Bieber fans believers. We need some like believe SVers. I don't know. What is your message to frustrated BCH people during this time of trial?
My message. What's my altar call?
Yeah.
my sermon to the BCH folks.
Yeah.
Hey, you deserve more than all that fighting, you know? Like, you deserve more than a life of coming home arguing with your girl every night. You deserve someone that'll treat you right, someone that can scale, someone that'll take you places. You should let BSV love you.
Here's the incredible thing is that everyone who's worried about all the things that could theoretically happen when they come to BSV, it's like none of that matters unless you are scaling and like preserving your network effect. If you keep splitting and you're unable to scale, then nothing else matters. It's a non-starter. So I think you might as well at least start building on the chain that can actually scale and try to fix the other problems than to be building on a chain that is never going to scale, is going to continue to split over and over. Because what's going to happen too, in the best case where BCHN is now the one that takes over and that BCH doesn't lose much market cap and ABC is just like a sideshow pet project for Amaury to get paid. What's going to happen is that BCHN will split again in the future. It's guaranteed to happen because a lot of the people still in there are not really like the greatest. Like they've woken up to the fact that Amaury's bad. But a lot of these people are the same doofuses who were defending him for months and months and months.
And they have an underlying ethic of purity through purging. It reminds me of the Randians when I used to work on campuses and work with all these student groups. And the University of Michigan Objectivist Club had 3 members, and then 2 of them purged the third because he volunteered to help the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
TK, we need to compose a Boys to Men style song, like "Girl, leave this guy and come over to me. I'll give you what he can't," for BCH people to come to BSV. I feel like this would have a big impact. You can change the world.
I'm about to do
I have 2 questions I want to ask. One for Steve though and then I want to ask all you guys a question and maybe we'll wrap up. Okay, so Steve, and TK had one too we got to mention from the chat. Steve, do you think that, like, I'm not optimistic about Bitcoin Cash at all. So do you think that there's a way that like BCHN, like, are you bullish about BCHN at all? Like, let's just say they defeat Amaury and they survive, market cap's basically the same. Is BCHN even relevant to you? Is that exciting at all?
Yeah. So in my opinion, it's sort of like Bitcoin Cash had gangrene and it went on for a long time and it's affecting multiple limbs and they're faced with an option. You either cut off your limbs or you die. So I think the fact of the getting rid of Amaury is like cutting off some limbs. Well, it's not just Amaury. If it was only Amaury,
and by the way, you're cutting off your limbs, and the battle you're in is a foot race. So good luck.
Yeah. If they could just get rid of him, I think that would be great. But that never works that way. You have a bunch of people that are banded around the guy.
Do you see people on BCHN who like you're like looking at them, you think these are the guys who are, and their philosophy about Bitcoin, their understanding of
frankly, no, not at all. Yeah, it's something like that. Maybe it's 2 different colors of gangrene. Like you got one on the left side, your body's blue, and the other side it's like brown.
It's like, hey, this one's gonna kill you tomorrow. Let's get rid of it. This other one's not advanced yet. We'll probably have to take it later.
Yeah, in my opinion, it depends on what where Roger's going, and I guess maybe, I mean, there were some pretty hardcore BCH people at BitPay, but I feel like they've become less and less relevant over time. So there's one sense in which I'm more bullish that the limbs are being cut off, but I recognize that it seems to be it is a fundamental personnel problem. Turns out that was the problem with BTC. It's the fucking problem with BCH. It is a personnel problem, and a bunch of the people who are now in leadership positions on BCHN were 1 year ago crapping on us for being critical of Amaury. They are not competent in the domain of project management. They don't have great social skills. They clearly don't have good systems thinking. So even if they're good developers, I think that's a very bad sign. My only hope is that for BCH is if Roger and his infrastructure goes with BCHN, then maybe you can have the next generation of competent new fresh blood devs and community that gets in there and changes things around. I just don't think that's likely to happen.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are the same people. Like the reasons they were complaining about the criticism of Omri too was like talking about developer capture, like you are anti-dev, or talking about scaling. Like a lot of them seem to be of the position that it's, you know, you can't scale that quickly, or you know, we need to, you know, soft limit the block size cap right now, or that these kinds of transactions that they're doing on BSV are spam. Like it doesn't sound like they are a whole lot philosophically different than Omri. What they have going for them is like they're afraid of Omri because of centralization, because Omri is too much like BSV in their opinion, and that's why they hate him. As opposed to like, no, like there's a lot of reasons to be upset with ABC.
Yeah, and I think the only reason they started to criticize Omri is because they saw something that was so straightforwardly nonsense that you'd have to be a fool not to think something's fishy is going on. The problem is they didn't have the method of reasoning where the red flags were going off exactly 6 months a year ago. So that's and you know, some criticism thrown at Roger too, that even if Roger saw this, and I know he did, the fact of the matter is, since he's the biggest player, whatever influence he had, it either wasn't thrown around fast enough, he wasn't aggressive enough. The team that he had around him, they were too polite. They were too passive. I think back to what Mike Hearn said.
Yeah.
Mike Hearn gave an excellent interview a long time ago where he said, my suggestion, my hope is that Gavin revokes the commit access of these small blockers and just goes ahead and himself, he does the increase the blocks.
Yeah, Gavin was too nice. Mike was saying we need to throw our weight around and just force it to happen. And Mike was the only, but really, that's why I like Mike the most, is because Gavin is kind of like easily manipulated, right? I mean, and you could see that even with his relationship with Craig. Like Gavin, even if Craig is Satoshi, Gavin sort of got taken advantage of. Yeah, and he let himself get taken advantage of.
Yeah. So I feel the same. I feel the same way, that actually what we would need is a Roger Ver and BCH that was more assertive and less diplomatic and less polite. But the thing is, what is he going to do? The only thing he can do is make it more like BSV. Yeah. So like, why not just go to BSV in the first place?
Well, and I understand the position he was in at the time, though, too. Is like the guy. I mean, he still is, I'm sure, but he's just tired too. Like he's going through lawsuits. Market cap's declining over the last year, losing money. Like, I mean, I could see from his perspective, it's like, oh God, like I don't want to deal with these guys. I know he saw the problems, but he's like, I don't want to deal with these guys. Like, I hope they just fix their shit. I don't want to be the guy. And why should he be? Like, why does he want to be the guy who's constantly running around having to save people's asses? He already spent $1 million on the hash.
And when he's the only one, it's not like he has a great network that he's relying on of the other business-minded folks. It's just him.
No, BCH can't be every time something bad happens, Roger spends $1 million to save them. That's a terrible, terrible thing.
Especially when it's the same people he's bailing BCH out from. It's like the Fuchballs, he might be a nice guy. He said some good things, but not only was he wrong, the dude had an article, his thing that he thought, I'm going to make an article explaining why the main node implementation, the central node implementation should be Bitcoin ABC because Omri Sachet is the guy. Like Fuchball is the dude who wrote that article.
And now he's really against him, but
that's a problem. That's a personnel problem.
Yeah. It's indicative that they don't have the reasoning capacity or understanding to predict this again in the future.
TK, you posted something in the chat, and Derek, you said you had a final question, and we can bring it home. We're getting close to, I was gonna say tapped out, but honestly, give me another beer, I could probably go for 4 more hours. But let's wrap it up.
Yeah, TK, what's your thing? I mean,
well, I'll just give a little pitch to the BCH people that are kind of on the fence why you should come over to BSV. And I'll skip out on my question because I know we're pressed for time. I don't know if y'all ever seen this. This is an old school movie reference, but y'all remember that baseball movie called Major League? It was a movie about I believe the team owner was a Vegas showgirl, and she inherited the Cleveland Indians from her dad, and she didn't want the team to be in Cleveland for obvious reasons. So she wanted to get the team relocated to a nicer place like Miami or something like that. And the only way she could do it was to exploit an escape clause in the contract that said if they have an attendance that's like below a certain number, like under 1 million people attending the games, then she could exercise the escape clause and move the team to Miami. So she wanted to exploit that loophole. So what she did was she fired all the good people, hired a bunch of, incompetent people around her, and put all of these people in positions of power that just could not deliver with the hope that they would lose. And the result was predictable. They started out the season on a losing streak. And then at one point, once they got to the place where they thought they were going to achieve this goal, one of the managers just tells the players, hey, look, I'm going to be honest with you all. You're all going to be gone at the end of the season. You're going to get sent to the minor leagues because the owner wants to lose. The owner wants the sales to be bad because she wants to move this ticket to Miami. And the players were like, well, if we have nothing to lose, we might as well try to win the pennant as a way to give her the middle finger. And they began to rally together and create this improbable run, from the second half of the season on. And in the end, they're able to give the owner the middle finger by actually winning the pennant and overcoming incredible odds. If you're outside of BSV and you hate Calvin and Craig, it's because you don't believe that they want to win. It's not just because you think they have bad attitudes. You don't think these guys really care about BSV. You think these guys are lying, conniving, manipulating, and they want to destroy BSV. But here's how you can give them the middle finger if that's what you really believe about them. Come on over to the only blockchain that actually has the capacity to scale and win the freaking pennant by actually building things on the blockchain that are so cool, that are so awesome, that you're going to start attracting more and more people to it. And this thing begins to scale at a level that is bigger than their personalities. And just like the owner from Cleveland, she can't destroy the team because there are too many people involved. That is the only means by which Bitcoin can be protected. Make it so good and so scalable that nobody can ignore it. Nobody can defeat it. It's not by trusting Craig and Calvin. So if you really hate them and you really want to give them the middle finger and you really don't trust them, come on over and bring all of those cool projects to the only game in town. What else you gonna do? Fiddle around on Ethereum? Come on home to BSV. Let's win the pennant.
I feel like we got to end right there. I mean,
I wanted to ask my question.
All right, fine. Ask your question. You can't have a intellectual discussion after the altar call.
No, you should end at this moment right now. After that,
yeah. After I just cut the steam. No, that was great. Well, I just wanted. I've seen a lot of people talking about I've seen a lot of people complaining about BSV recently. BSVers complaining and just like broken promises, lack of momentum, lack of progress on things, on a variety of things. Like obviously the prices massively collapsed recently. What do you guys think? Are you guys excited about BSV right now? I mean, what's the kind of sense that you're getting, and how justified are some of these concerns?
I'll tell you, I am excited. In fact, I think I'm more excited because of the criticisms. I get excited by that because I see people who are active in BSV, not just people hanging around, not just numpties like us, but some people who are building a lot of cool stuff, openly saying, hey, yeah, we need to move faster. Hey, we should have more options for tokenization. Hey, stop making announcements. Let's just go build stuff. I think that's healthy. I think that's good. I think that's a good sort of dynamism. I think it's useful to not just have a bunch of cheerleading and fanism. I think it's basically a lot of people kind of taking the mindset that we had when we made our hype and bullshit in Bitcoin video, the video called Childish and Moronic, that, yeah, like whatever PR, who cares? That's old now. Just put up or shut up. That actually makes me excited. The market's crazy. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know how long the market's going to take to do what. Maybe it will never succeed, but I'm not less optimistic than I have been before. If anything, I'm a little bit more optimistic. Every day I go and use Twitch, it gets a little more fun. Every day I post to Streamanity, it gets a little more valuable to me. I see a few more people on there. Every time I see updates that these guys are making, I get a little more excited. And these conversations, even people writing for CoinGeek about how this approach by Enchain and whatever hasn't always been right, like that's good. that's healthy, I see that as a bullish sign.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I guess the lesson is that the numpties philosophy is just spilling out into the ecosystem. We are the most influential show in all of Bitcoin.
Well, we're the best show. I mean, honestly, who else? Where else do you get this level of commentary? I don't think anywhere.
Yeah, nowhere. I mean, maybe one of Craig's videos or something.
Yeah, one of his blog posts.
A Vin Armani video.
I feel quite bullish. I'll be honest. Like I think the present price is irrelevant. I feel bullish sort of for a different reason. Maybe this is naive because I actually sort of felt this way with when the BCH fork happened and that didn't pan out. So maybe this is naivete, but the projects that are built on BSV right now aren't going to be broken by protocol changes. And it feels like the momentum that you can build when all the growth is forward and you don't have to worry about what just happened in BCH. That to me is incredibly bullish. That even if there's stagnation for like a couple of years, okay, you still have big block Bitcoin that has already punched out multiple 300 megabyte blocks and the protocol is not changing. So it seems to me, maybe this is naive, seems like it's sort of a matter of time when the right people find this is the project they've been looking for, the scalable Bitcoin. I feel like it's only progress in one direction. And I wanted to say too, this is related to what we were saying a few minutes ago, like of Roger trying to keep everything together. I see the regression towards having to focus on protocol stuff as a massive regression. Like we should be only focused on growth. And the fact that you even have to look behind at all, you're not working on growth anymore. You've got the dramatic infighting. You're trying to keep the thing from falling apart. The network is going to split. It could be disastrous. That to me seems like you're accelerating in the opposite direction.
Yeah, so every Twitter post and Reddit post Roger has to make about Amory is a distraction from his own business, right? Well,
exactly. And he has a finite, him individually and people like him have a finite amount of patience.
Yeah.
And if the relevant people abandon your project because of internal bullshit, that is devastating in my opinion. So the fact that
you just don't believe in infinities.
True statement. Nothing true has ever been spoken. I don't believe in actualized, completed infinite totalities. There's a very different thing.
So by the way, one other exciting thing is the businesses, and there's not a ton of them, but the ones that I use actively on BSV are actually already better than anything that was built on BCH when some of that stuff was happening. Like,
and they keep getting better.
Yeah,
like there's like
Switch and Streamanity and stuff like that. They're miles ahead already of like yours.org, right?
Yeah.
And you look at the most comparable thing on BCH would be like read.cash, which has gone tremendously downhill and is full of spam now because they're not building it right. It's just completely overwhelmed.
So a little tidbit here. An incredibly influential person who shall not be named on BCH, I sent them something about Streamanity and said, hey, just for fun, you should post a video here. And they were not familiar with it and came back and said, holy crap, tell me more about how this thing works. This is amazing. Why isn't there something like this on BCH? So
there's not because of the protocol things, I think. And because the people on BCH, like you said several times, I think, is there's a different mindset. Like there is a profit-seeking mindset with the group of people who went to BSV that doesn't seem to exist as much on BCH. There is a mindset of like, let's build something and just get some donations for it or or let's get some funding for something and then go build something that has no clear profit model, but that's kind of cool. There's still a hobbyist mindset on.
Yes. They're not
BCH.
Consumer facing enough.
Yeah.
So like, I think I've had some conversation with BCH people and you talk about social media and the blockchain, like, oh yeah, we have read.cash. It's like read.cash is not aesthetically a real project that is going to take off. Read.cash is not going to have mass adoption unless it is sold or taken over by somebody else, period. And the people that think, it's like they have this little box in their mind, social media on the blockchain. And that box is checked because read.cash.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking enough like, okay, are you actually trying to build something that is going to be used by people outside of this community in the real world? I think generally the answer on BCH is no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to my surprise, it does seem to be yes on BSV. Like the Twetch, that interface looks pretty damn sharp. Streamadity looks pretty damn sharp. Like those things are believable entrepreneurial projects that I don't see any comparison to any project that looks like that outside of Bitcoin.com and BCH.
TK, are you bullish on BSV right now?
I'm more bullish than ever before. And I'll tell you why. Because I think early on, it was all about the interesting possibilities of BSV and how cool all of these things sounded if someone does something. And there was a culture of seeing if one of these CoinGeek projects or InChain is going to do something cool or onboard some enterprise. And we still haven't seen much of that happening yet. We'll see what happens with it. But what we're seeing now in the past 6 months is more builders in the BSV community criticizing BSV, criticizing each other. And to me, because I'm an actual capitalist, I love competition and I love criticism, even if it's mean, even if it's harsh, because you can't trust the community to grow and get better unless there's some real fighting in the community. It's kind of like what Jordan Peterson says about marriage. He says, if you're married to somebody and they're just in love with you and praising you all the time, that's not a healthy marriage. You want a marriage where someone contends with you, where they push back, they get in the way. And we're starting to see that healthy contention in BSV, but it's not the kind of contention that destroys like what we see in BCH. It's the kind of contention that builds,
So you've said a couple times in this episode, something akin to BSV is the wife you deserve. She'll fight with you, she'll contend with you, but she will love you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been really working that analogy, man. Things real good at home right now. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I like, I'll just say at the end, is I think it's good that people are not just, there seem to be more and more people being like, I don't need to listen to Calvin and Craig to work on BSV, and I don't need to wait for them to save me. I'm just going to build something and I don't need to listen. And that's actually a good sign. Like if you can have the scaling that Calvin and Craig have brought and the locked down protocol, so to speak, without the other bullshit, you've got like the perfect combination of stuff. And the only way you get there is by the people just taking charge and just saying, we're just going to do this whether you like it or not. And you can't actually do anything about it. And that's great. And then you get the best of both worlds, because as much as we like joke about Calvin and Craig, like they are the only people in the whole world who have built a scaled lockdown protocol. Like you can say, regardless of anything else, it doesn't matter.
They saved Bitcoin.
Yeah. They could make complete asses out of themselves on everything else. And yet they seem to be the only people who get the importance of the most important thing, which is a scaled Bitcoin. So thanks to Calvin and Craig for that. I wish you wouldn't sue people so much, but seriously, thank you. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I want to reference Isaac's 3 favorite words: compare to what? Because you can't judge the value of something in isolation, and everybody wants to talk about BSV in isolation. They want to talk about it in comparison with the fantasy in their head of Andreas Antonopoulos being the spokesperson rather than Craig Wright. But it's compared to what?
I don't have that fantasy of Andreas Antonopoulos being a spokesperson for anything.
There's a story about two friends that are walking through the woods. You may have heard this before. And they see a bear that's about 50 feet away. And one guy takes off his backpack, pulls off a pair of running shoes, and begins to lace them up. And his buddy says, "You actually think that we can outrun that bear?" And he says, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you." And I think this is a great analogy for Bitcoin. If you look at that bear as kind of like the harshness of reality, the bear is that aspect of reality that reminds us that we cannot survive over the long haul without utility, without producing real value, without moving forward. And BSV is the person in this situation that says, I may be moving slowly early on. I may not be the one off to the leading start, but I'm the only one that really understands reality enough to know how to win. The other guy, he's depending on being lucky. He's taking a gamble. And that's what all the other cryptos and blockchains are doing right now. They're depending on luck, and they're off to a fast start. They can survive for a while, but over time, that bear is going to catch up with them and eat them. And BSV will win, not because it's perfect, not because you should let Craig babysit your kids, but because all it needs to do is outrun everything else. And everything else, for all those smart people, for all those people that are more intelligent than Craig who are leading them, they still don't get something very simple. All that technobabble aside, they still don't think Bitcoin can scale. Imagine that, you know?
Isaac, TK just gave me a really great idea for your kids' schooling.
I'm like absolutely delighted at the thought of Craig babysitting my kids. That would just be a riot.
Yeah, he could do video chats on the theory of Bitcoin with your kids.
Speaking
I'm
of,
gonna tell Bible stories.
I think my kids just came in the room. All right, we got to wrap it, gentlemen.
All right.
You guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.